call the study session to order. Laura Lee, will you please call the roll?
Stu Boyd,
Here.
Denise Chapman,
Here.
Lori Goble,
Present.
Dawn Kirk,
Here.
Alexandra Lessem,
Here.
Nancy Rumpel,
Here.
Mike Schultz.
Here. All right, thank you. Nancy, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
allegiance
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that, and I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. All right. So motion from Denise, second from Dawn. Any discussion? Let's proceed then to the vote. Laura Lee?
Stu Boyd,
Aye?
Denise Chapman,
Aye.
Lori Goble,
Aye.
Dawn Kirk,
Aye.
Alexandra Lessem,
Aye.
Nancy Rumpel,
Aye.
Mike Schultz.
Yes. All right. We'll move then to discussion items. 3.1 is a report from the Curriculum Improvement Council dealing with new course proposals. And I'll turn it over to whoever is making that presentation. And here they come.
Ready for it.
Good evening, Mr. President. Switch this up. I call myself. Dr. Heller, members of the board, Sarah Rasmussen, Assistant Superintendent of Learning Services. And this evening we have two of our Learning Services team members with us. We have Tiffany Jones, who is our Director of Curriculum and Learning Design. We have Andy Stevens, who is our Director of Career and Technical Education, CTE. And they are going to review the course proposals that have come their way through the Curriculum Improvement Council. And this is, according to board policy, what we need to do in order to have these courses approved is we need to bring them before the Board of Education.
All right. Welcome.
Great, thank you. Mr. President, Dr. Heller, members of our board, and new board members. I am Tiffany Jones. I'm the director, as Sarah said, of Curriculum and Learning Design. I've got Andy Stevens, who is also a part of our CIC process. So tonight, as Sarah said, policy IG does refer to what we need to do, that all the board members, you guys actually approve courses for Thompson School District. And so when we look at our approval process, all of the courses were submitted to myself and our team. We put out a Google survey for any teacher to submit any course that they wish to proceed through the process with. And then the curriculum and learning team, so my team reviews those submissions to make sure that the proposals were fulfilled with all of the required information. Information would be, does the principal support this? Do we have, curricular needs that go along with the courses? What standards would that meet? Et cetera, and why do they have this idea? Because we also have about 3,400 courses already approved, so do we already have something similar, they just want to change it? Because we would go down a different process if that were the case. So when we think about our CIC, we have teachers, we've got our TEA president, which Sue is here. We've got director also on that, and then we've got, Brandy can be a part of it if it needs to go to that piece. We've got our TEA actually secondary rep, Kayla Steele. So you can see up here that we've got a wide range, and I'm guessing when you guys decide committees, one of you will be able to be on CIC as well and oversee that process. So when we think about this, as we think about our process, I just want to remind everybody, our role is really to ensure that the process is followed. It's the board's role to decide what's approved and not approved. So really, our role is to make sure each of those checks have been made, and then we bring that to you all. So when we think about what CIC discusses, we really look through what are the benefits for students approving the course. Can we actually sustain this course as a system That could be financially, that could be with materials, it could be, that last one is, do we have a unicorn teacher? Is it only specific to one specific teacher that can teach this? And what happens if they win the lottery and leave? Can we sustain that course? And then what might be the domino effect if this course is approved? Does it take away students from a different course? Are we looking at it might be competing with a course, etc. So those are the questions we discuss as we meet as a group. So here are this is the first page of courses that we have for you to review. When we have the school, we put on there exactly which school is requesting, because sometimes together schools come and submit as a group. We also have on there what they intended, or which grade level is intended for the course to go for, and then the bucket or the credit and the amount of credits that it's submitted for, and then fees. Of course, you guys also approve fees on there to make sure that you guys get that opportunity to say yes or no. On that far right-hand column, we've got our CIC recommendation. So we had Unified Art. If you guys remember last year when I presented, if you're brand new to the committee, Unified Art keeps coming up as one that potentially wants to be submitted. Something I want to bring to this group is the reason CIC denies it is this course was specific for students with disabilities. It wasn't like a unified or a peer buddy system. This was to create a course specific for students with disabilities, which means we would pull students with disabilities out of our general education classrooms and do a specific art just for students with disabilities. That is one of the pieces of obviously why CIC denied that, because of course our goal is to create more inclusive environments and not pull students with disabilities out of their classes, and that was the main reason that was denied. We know that GeoPhys is a course we currently have right now. Many of you have had students in GeoPhys, and we have revamped that entire course. Part of the revamp is retitling, and when we retitle, we go through the CIC process. And so the science teachers have come together several times, and they are proposing that we call it Earth and Physical Science Lab. As most of you know, through policy IKF, we do require that students have 3 credits with science lab. When lab is not in the course title, it gets really confusing for families and students to select a course, because GeoPhys, it was not called Geophysical Lab, it was just GeoPhys. And so we wanted to make sure that when we revamped the course, we also titled it appropriately. And so as you're signing up for those course registration sheets, we added the lab in there to make it less confusing for families and students to say this actually does count for graduation requirement. That one, obviously, the CIC team approved for a full credit. And again, remember, these are CIC recommendations. These are really up for you all to decide. The next one we have is history, controversies in history. That is a CU Denver, that is a college level course. That is a concurrent enrollment course. We've had the teacher actually resubmit the syllabus a few times. He's reworked it, he has added and taken away a few different items. The very first time CIC met, there were questions around when we have controversies in the title and we have board policy, IMB, around controversial issues, what message is that sending? Are parents or students going to be concerned? How are we really transparent with our families of what we're teaching? There were questions around how do we make sure the course syllabus is signed by our families so parents are well aware of what that process would be. What would happen if a student automatically got placed in that class who didn't sign up for it? Because we want to put those safeguards in place, and of course it's all about transparency with our families. And so I've got on there, need more information. Part of that is because the teacher has still been reworking after feedback from CIC to rework that syllabus. And it really is a college level course. And so I've got on there, need more information. When we think about Math 1240 for Math for Liberal Arts, that is something that our teachers and our students are asking for. Again, it's a concurrent enrollment class. When you see those concurrent enrollment credit types, of course, that is based on the Carnegie units, and that's how we convert them for Thompson School District. Math for Liberal Arts was approved, or recommended to be approved by the committee. We've got Principles of Business at LHS, which would qualify under that career pathway. That one was approved. business economics, again, coming from Loveland High, career pathway was approved, and then configuring Windows Server at our TCC, or Thompson Career Campus, for 10th and 11th graders for a 0.25, that was approved as well. The second page we have for you here is we have really been working with our JROTC group to make sure that students are not leaving JROTC because they're not getting credits in those buckets that would qualify for graduation. And so what we have submitted here is, because JROTC is for all of our high school students, we have really created a 4-year pathway for JROTC. In the past, it's really been built out for what they call LET 1 and LET 2, but then what we started seeing is that juniors and seniors actually aren't taking JROTC courses because they were only counting toward elective credit and they already had that. So if you look at our proposal, they would like for level 1 to be a 0.5 fitness credit and then that 0.5 health credit. We've already done the crosswalking with the standards to make sure that we would satisfy the needs and the standards to count that as credit. And then in level 2, they would be looking at that career pathway, and then also we have a course that has been pre-approved, the JROTC Civics. So they would be getting now credits that again count towards graduation. So when you look at that pathway, they've created a 4-year pathway, but they're also earning credits that would support graduation outside of just the area that would be career pathway. Those do have fees, and again, it's $10 per semester, and that's per the JROTC. The last one on there, we've been working with Dorothy. They submitted archery last year. If you remember from last year, we denied that one last year because we didn't have all of those T's crossed and I's dotted with risk, and we have done that. We have crossed those T's and dotted those I's. Our JROTC teachers, or one of them is now a licensed teacher through Thompson, which is incredible. And we also know that they have they've passed everything that Dorothy has asked them to submit, and all of the equipment is provided for the archery class through the Army. And so they're very, very excited to propose that one to you all as well. Did I miss anything? So our next step is, does the board have an appetite for us continuing to refine and rework that History 1400, because that was the one we had on there that just needed more information, and of course we would go back to our teacher and then come back to you all as we've refined, if that is what the board chooses to do. And then the next step would be for those approved courses that CIC is recommended to approve. We would move that to Infinite Campus to create those course numbers and those course codes, and then registration sheets, as we know, is coming up for all of our high schools. Those would be added to the high school course registration sheets. What questions do you have for us?
All right. Board, would it be helpful to look at each of the courses individually? I guess that's my question. Would you like to look at each course that was in that spreadsheet individually and go around and ask a question if you have it? I don't think it'll take us very long to do that because some of them appear to be straightforward and there doesn't appear to be any conflict with the presentation, etc. So why don't we begin with Unified Art? Nancy, I'll start with you. Do you have any questions related
My
to?
only question on that is, and I understand what you're saying about, to me when I think of unified, it means that we've got a cohesive group together that's helping. But I guess my question is, if it keeps getting denied, why do they keep bringing it forward? What are they hoping will change, or like what's motivating them?
I think they're hoping that we would approve it. And I can tell you, Dr. Gabriel Lasso and I have been to all of our high schools to ask these questions from our teachers to make sure, because we've also seen Unified after school is very different than what their hope is for Unified during the day. And there is the difference there, where Unified after school with athletics, we do have, typical peers interacting with our students with disabilities. That is not what they have submitted. And so we've been working with these teachers to really say how we already do that in art class. We have peer buddies, we've got a positive PE class. Some of those pieces already do exist, but that has not been the submission and their request. They do want it where it would be students with disabilities specifically.
Are they able to show, like, what's the real benefit to the students if we did that, other than?
At this time, no.
No, okay.
Lori, question?
I guess that would have been my question as to, what's the benefit of having that separate, just more focused on, or them being with others that are, have the same, might have the same challenges that they can, work with and.
All right. Denise, question or comment? Mike?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Alexander? And Dawn?
I guess mine is, why wouldn't we tweak it to make it inclusive? I mean, since that's the sticking point, and we know that's the benefit, that's what we all love about Unified. Opening it up and calling it Unified Art, I think would have then students participating to meet the needs that we have of not segregating students by ability. And so I guess I'm just a little confused, I guess, as far as feedback goes, as to why we wouldn't
Can I
just do that.
Can I just say one thing on that?
Mm-hmm.
The argument I would make is we already have that.
Right.
We
I
have
would
our
agree.
classes right now that all students get to take.
I agree. Yeah.
And so what they're asking for is one that only students with disabilities would take. I think if we created that and said, okay, now any student can take Unified Art, my concern would be,
It's art.
why would a student who wants to take art not just continue to take the same art classes they've already taken? I don't know that we're gonna see kids sign up for Unified Art because they're currently sitting in art classes with their peers with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And to take kids out of that general ed environment, we're actually reversing our ability to do least restrictive environment by putting kids in a class with only their disabled peers. That'd be my
Yeah,
only.
thank you for that. And honest, that I guess that goes along with that then is also the standards are gonna be the same.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for saying that part and connecting those dots. Yeah, I mean, at a club level then, I think maybe that's where we consider this.
Yes.
Right, okay, gotcha, thank you.
My question is, are the parts of the curriculum of this proposed class available to disabled students in the regular offerings?
Yes.
So there would be nothing new and different, nothing that would be geared particularly to that group of students. Do I understand you correctly?
Correct.
You're correct.
All right, thank you. Any more questions before we, you wanna say something?
Yeah, no, just the light bulb went on, that's all.
Right. Anybody else have any further questions on Unified Art before we move on? And as a reminder, we will vote on these submissions at our December 17th board meeting. All right. And a question for either Dr. Heller or for Ms. Rasmussen: Will we deal with each course individually, or will we be given a list and say,
I believe you'll be given a list of the new course proposals. Any feedback we received today from you as far as we'd like to see a tweak here, we'd like to see a change here, will be reflected in that document you'll see prior to the 17th.
All right.
You'll be asked to vote on the entire list of recommended courses at
As a
that time,
unit.
as a unit.
Okay, thank you, that was my question. All right. Let's move then to the Earth and Physical Science Lab. Lori, I'll start with you this time. Do you have any questions or comments?
To me, it just sounded like having the lab in there that does make it more clarity for the students and the parents, so.
I will also say the Earth and Physical Science is the more common term for this course if you go around the country. When a student transfers in from our district to somewhere else, they always have to ask our kids, what is geophys? Because most kids take earth science or physical science or earth and physical science when they go around the country. So it's a more typical name for this course.
Appreciate that. Thank
Okay,
you.
Denise,
Questions?
Mike? Alexander? I don't have any questions either. let's move on.
Oh, Nancy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I start here, then I need to remember to go back to the beginning.
I don't have any, but.
Yeah. You guys keep me honest as I'm getting used to this new role, okay?
Yeah.
All right. Let's move then to the History 1400 course, Controversies in History. And Denise, we'll start with you. Do you have any questions or comments?
It is, some of what was said before, but I mean, it does seem like this keeps coming back. Why can't we, guide that instructor in a way that we get an answer and you can just put it behind us or start teaching it? Is there some secret code that they're just not getting at this point, or what's the hold-up to getting it? Since we've asked for information multiple times.
Yeah, my understanding is have been tweaks along the way through this process with the CIC team they've come back with, here's some concerns we have, and they've made some changes to the syllabus multiple times. Kind of we're to this point where there's still, I think from the curriculum department and the learning services team, more questions that we still would like to see answered before we move forward with this course. I have some questions. I think I've shared with the board some questions that I have before we move forward with this course. One of my bigger concerns is right now this will be taught at one school. But as this course were to potentially expand across campuses, how do you create alignment of this course when the very nature of the course is interpreting controversy? And that can be interpreted very differently depending on the instructor that's doing it. I'm worried a little bit about the potential for some, I think as I've shared, if parents, students are enrolled in this course, and when students sign up for courses, their parents aren't signing off on that during the course selection process. But there will be a part in the fall where we will have to have parents sign off on the syllabus based on our policy. If a bunch of students' parents say, I didn't want you to take this course, we will have a huge issue if now we're going to find new homes for all of those students in the schedule. That's a concern I have just from our counseling standpoint. And then how do we create enough transparency about what controversies are we covering and how exactly are we covering them in a way that is fair? So there's a lot of things that I would still like a lot more information on to feel really comfortable about this course.
Denise, anything else?
How do we cover controversies in history in our existing courses currently? Is there a need for a full
Correct.
outside course? Or are we in, history 9, 10, 11, and 12, covering this content and just not packaging it?
Correct. Yeah. The standards are the standards, and we're covering them in all of our social studies courses. And as you said, those controversial moments in history are coming up in the historical context in which they happen in the regular social studies courses. And we have a policy that guides our teachers in terms of how they do the controversial history topic. So that's another, I think, concern that we have is, do we need a separate course just for the controversial sector? That's.
Mike? I have a few questions. I would hate to think that we can't teach difficult subjects in history.
We do.
You made a comment about, well, it has controversy in it, so it's going to tip people off, and I was a little, that kind of caught my attention a little bit, because I feel like, understanding history is understanding nuance, and is understanding the good and the bad and everything that goes along with it, and I think helping kids think about some of these difficult issues is really important. So I have some concerns. The one question I have is I have a technical question and then a more specific one. So this is a college credit course. So this is kind of over and above, when students leave, they'll have college in the back pocket. So there's value to it. It extends beyond just the typical. So you're looking at. I'm assuming that this is attractive to kind of a certain student who's college bound and who's kind of into. So I think, I would expect that it would be taught at a much higher level. Is that kind of correct? In that so that we would have higher expectations for the students and kind of the understandings and how it's taught as well. And so that, I'd like to kind of have a little bit better understanding of that, differentiate between kind of what it means, the rigor that goes into having a course that involves college credit, and what that means. And the second question is, I would just like to understand, like, specific from the curriculum, what are the what's the controversy behind the controversy, I guess? Like, what are we talking about when we say, can you give me an example of what might be taught in this course that would kind of stick out? That would be really helpful for me to kind of ground myself in this discussion a little bit more.
So when we looked at the very first time the syllabus was given to CIC, one of the weeks was focused all on critical race theory, and students were able to choose, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was students will discover critical race theory and then do an essay on specific topics, I believe
Yes,
was
that's
how it was
correct.
written. When we think about how that was presented to students that are in 10th and 11th grade, describing critical race theory to 10th and 11th and 12th graders on their own would be something that CIC found really, really difficult for students. And so then the teacher reworked the syllabus to say, okay, how do we make sure that's super transparent to parents? And, because those aren't part of, like, critical race theory is not in the state standards.
Sure.
Whereas when you ask the controversies, like, there are controversial pieces in history, but we follow the state standards that guide us. The depth in this class is much deeper, and we're asking kids to do it by themselves because it's a college level course. We say, great, go read these chapters, and you kind of go figure out by yourself, and then we're gonna come back and discuss. Whereas typically in our standard courses right now, teachers are leading that discussion. We control the depth versus a college level course. We kind of say, here you go.
Sure.
Now go explore and kind of create your own thinking around that. When you're looking at a 10th grader, an 11th, and a 12th grader, how do we do that in a very appropriate way?
Sure, and I mean, for that example that you gave regarding critical race theory, are you suggesting that they're teaching critical race theory as a concept, or they're teaching the controversy behind critical race
That's a
theory?
great question.
It's a great question.
And that's, I mean, and I think both are, it's important, you know, to understand, I mean, they're important for students to understand, both, and so that I would be kind of interested to kind of learn more about kind of how that's approached, because I do think, I mean, I'm, history is, you know, it's a subject that's near and dear, and I think we need to be able to teach it in a way that allows for controversy and for discussion and for disagreement, because that's what history is for. So that's what.
Alexandra?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think it's interesting, and I think it's something that, you know, in response to you asked, do you want to continue to refine and work on it? I would say, I think in my mind, I would be fine with not approving it this year, but maybe by next year, like the archery for the JROTC, right? Maybe with a little more time, would be able to batten it down, address some of the, you know, concerns as far as parental consent and stuff like that, and have it a little bit more fleshed out and more ready to review, you know, next time. That's my thoughts. I think it's an interesting thing to think about.
Nope. Jerry, you done?
I'm done.
Okay. I really want to do it. In my mind, part of what I've heard so far is that we have a naming issue. And I get that, like, if we're aligning it to what CU Denver is doing, the name comes from that. But ultimately, history, as they say, if you like history, like if you think all things are good in history, then you haven't learned history, right? If you are learning history without understanding the controversies, if you think conflict is the end of it, and then it's not also controversial and complex, then you haven't learned history. And I have like such heartburn that we don't already teach this, like as we're talking about it, these things feel like the kinds of things that definitely getting college credit for should be in history classes. Those AP classes I would expect to get into the nuance of things, the conflicts of things, and beyond that, what was the ripple effects? What was the thing that 50 years later we can see, but we didn't see it at the time, right? I love that. And I think that it sounds like part of what we have an issue with is truly just that the name and the title creates then a conflict with another policy we have. And so I wonder if we also have some flexibility instead with naming, because if it's still aligning with what CU Denver is doing, then the name may not matter. I think that we are doing all of our students a disservice, not just the students who might be looking at college level courses, if we don't teach them why things impact different populations differently, right? I am almost every day upset about what I learned in this district about history, thinking that that was accurate. It was not accurate. And part of it is because there wasn't this piece of saying, who else might tell a different version of history? Who else wasn't the person writing this book? And when I look at that over and over and over again, it opens up a whole lot of history that I was like, I thought I knew about this, and it turns out I had no idea who else was impacted and how. And that we can't make good decisions. We can't be good students if we're not doing that. We can't really be functional adults without doing that. And so I think it's important that we do this, and I think the biggest concern I have about it is that it would be limited to one school. I always worry about that. And I especially worry about that given that we do want to have the depth to it, and we want to make sure that we have people who feel good about teaching it. But I think that we need to be teaching it at all the schools and working through those logistics that are also a big deal, because it's silly to me that we wouldn't have this.
Kind of a quick question just for Tiffany. In our current social studies courses and standards, are we currently addressing opposing viewpoints,
Absolutely.
opposing situations, controversies as they come up in context of the history that we're learning?
Yes.
So we're not teaching and
Correct.
discussing and having controversial discussions
Correct.
about these different viewpoints. We're just not isolating them to one course. They're happening in the context of the different courses that we teach. I just want to make sure. Okay.
And that's what makes me think about it being a branding issue or a naming issue, because you're right, if it's spread out and we don't flag all history for parents to sign off on, then I also wonder about that.
I do know, based on our policy though, that if there are certain things that are going to come up that may create a parent concern, we do require, at that time, we give the parent the opportunity to opt their child out of that unit or out of that portion, and then we give them an opportunity to do something, an alternate assignment. That's what our policy requires. By having an entire course that's essentially, this whole course may be controversial, it's going to create this parent-required sign-off that we're gonna have to logistically figure out.
Yeah, I hear that. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Heller just asked the first of my questions, so I'm going to ask a couple of others. Don't we have a board policy that deals with the teaching of controversial topics? How does this course fit into that policy? Does my question make sense, Tiffany? Or how does it relate to this policy that we already have?
I think that is exactly what the CIC concerns were when the course title is called Controversies in History.
Mhm.
How do we not contradict board policy? When the entire course, to Dr. Heller's point, is controversial, how do we ensure that we're following board policy? That was the first actually big question that CIC
Okay.
asked. And quite honestly, when we looked at that, we said, do we want to do a name change? And we also want to be fully transparent, because when we do a transcript for CU, we don't want that to be, hidden from a parent saying, wait, we call this History 1400, and then on the transcript, it's actually called Controversies in History. Our committee talked a lot about that, but that was a concern CIC discussed is, we've got board policy that says controversial issues, and now we're gonna offer a course called Controversies in History. Are they really contradicting each other?
Okay. When we look at this again on December 17th, or when you send this out for our examination again, I would like to have that policy included
Okay.
in what we receive so that we actually know what the verbiage is in that policy.
And I think we can also do things like the most recent version of the syllabus, the updated version of the syllabus,
Sure.
or things that we
Love
have
that.
from the
Sure.
instructor to help to make sure that we
Just
have
in-
as much information as possible.
Just include all of those things as attachments for us as we consider this again. Now, this curriculum is a packaged curriculum. It's already determined, it's not determined yet. Will it be a purchased curriculum or will it be prepared in-house? Have you gotten to that point in the discussion of this?
So because it is concurrent enrollment with
Yeah.
CU Denver, we are bound by our MOU with that post-secondary institution
Yeah,
to cover at least 85% of the approved concepts.
the syllabus?
The syllabus provided by CU Denver.
Yes.
Our MOU with them states we have to cover 85% of those competencies.
All right,
So we essentially get the competencies from our post-secondary partner,
yeah,
but we still have the latitude to develop curriculums, pedagogies, to implement those competencies. But we are bound by that MOU. We can't just say, oh, well, we'll pick here and teach a little bit of, like, we have to teach 85% of those competencies.
So we get the competencies, but there's not a curriculum to support that.
That's
So the
right.
teacher gets to create all of those pieces with their interpretation of how do I interpret this competency.
That's right.
There's not a textbook that we're receiving or the kids are receiving, as
There-
far as we know?
There is a recommended textbook,
By the university.
By the university, but it is up to us to provide that textbook.
Is there faculty support at the university level for?
There is, so, a little bit more, maybe, Mr. Schultz, your question earlier about the difference between a concurrent enrollment and a regular class. The concurrent enrollment instructors have to be credentialed by the post-secondary institution. And that process is all managed by the department chair. So in this case, at CU Denver, the department chair of the history department has to vet our Thompson School District staff member before they are ever approved to teach a concurrent enrollment class. And part of that vetting is approval of education and credentials. It also includes most times training and that support from that department at the post-secondary institution to deliver the curriculum in a way that essentially our campus becomes a satellite campus for that post-secondary institution.
okay. That actually takes care of my questions. Has anything occurred to the rest of you before we
Nancy.
move on?
Still Nancy.
Nancy and Lori haven't had a chance yet.
So with this, I had sent the email, and so, again, I think much of my concerns have been addressed by everyone else. The biggest thing I have is, not just with this class, but with this process is, we're supposed to approve these courses, and I have no idea what the syllabus is. So I would really, if we could change it so that, even like principles of business, I love business, but like, what is the syllabus? What are we gonna teach? So, especially with this particular course, not having any syllabus or anything, it's impossible for me even to say to you, yes, proceed, or no, don't proceed, because I have zero idea what we're talking about. I think if this course was coming from more of a perspective of not a historical, but more of a cultural studies class that was like more focused on, let's examine the culture, the all of those things, instead of like trying to be a true historical. I think that would probably be more suited for something like this, because like if you think about women voting, that was very controversial at the time. Now it'd be very controversial if you said we couldn't vote, But what created that time in society, the controversy, that's more to me cultural than historical facts. And I think that's where maybe some of this concern comes from, especially because we have if it's gonna be called History 1400, you're looking for it to be based on like historical facts, whereas the controversy, again, some people might think it's controversy. It was a controversy that women could vote. Some might think it's not. And today we could probably come up with all kinds. And without the syllabus, I don't even know, is this restricted to just US history? Is this like history since, the beginning of time? There's plenty, I mean, so I don't know, I don't even have enough information to tell you guys, like, to see or to not, because I just would feel like I'm just throwing the dark.
Okay, thank you. Lori?
I believe Director Shull, Dr. Heller, Director Ruckfeld have hit the nail on the head because, if you're teaching, as Director Shull said, what aspect of CRT are you teaching? What aspect of women voting are you teaching? There's just, it's so ambiguous. I mean, like I say, maybe the study of felines, are you studying house cats or are you studying lions in the wild? I mean, it's so broad. And it does need to be narrowed down. Syllabus would be very helpful.
All right, I think you've gotten
I think
thoughts
there's enough
from
interest in
all of us.
learning more to
Yeah.
potentially bring the syllabus and more information to the next meeting,
Yeah,
I believe. Yeah.
the syllabus, board policy, and a couple or three of the other things that have been requested. I think that would help us to make a more informed decision when we vote on this on December 17th. All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on then to Math 1240, Math for Liberal Arts. And Mike, I think you're leading off on this.
Yeah, I just have one comment. In the interest of time, I don't have any questions about any of the rest of them. It's pretty self-explanatory. However, I would like to kind of echo maybe some of the comment my colleague to the left about, I think when we see this, I would like to just have, I don't need a curriculum, a syllabus for every course, but just maybe a little bit more of a narrative description that to understand for each of them what's being taught, and just a little bit more background. And as somebody who's new and is kind of learning, that would be kind of helpful. And I think it to kind of advance my understanding, to make me comfortable to support it. And particularly, I don't want to rehash the controversy of it. But I think from just generally when we come back, I wish we just have just some narrative. Maybe the one, I think if we maybe a little bit more information would be helpful. But I think
Okay.
for the rest of it, I have no further questions about any of the other courses.
All right, Alexandra?
I agree. I mean, I don't think we need to go through each one individually, but I think a little more information
All
would
right,
be nice.
let's finish discussing this one, and then I'll ask if you'd like to deal with the rest of them as a group, or if you would like to continue talking about them individually. Dawn?
I don't have a question about this one. I know that I did have a question about one of them on the last page.
On the
Or
ROTC
should we-
page?
Are there all JRTs? Never
Yeah.
mind, we did cover it. I'm good on all of them.
Okay.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right. I don't have
It's
any
been a while.
questions either on this one. So board, are you comfortable?
You still have those three.
Right. I'm gonna have to figure out some kind of a light system or something like that so that I remember to look for people who haven't talked yet. I apologize, I'll figure this out.
You will. I'm in line with everyone else. I don't have questions on this one or any of the others. Would though at least like the syllabus, not the curriculum, just the syllabus so we have some general idea.
At least a better understanding of what exactly the concepts are being talked about, what's the overall purpose of the class, that sort of thing.
Laura?
I just want to make a comment because I have nieces and nephews who went through junior ROTC, so I think it's great that that's being as a credit course.
Yeah, I mean, there's an excitement to be able to make sure our kids can stay in that program, they want to stay in there without feeling like they have to make a decision about whether they can hit all the graduation requirements, or we're finding a way to make that alignment so these will actually meet graduation requirements for these students, because it can at some point create a real quick barrier for some kids to stay involved if we don't. So.
Denise?
I'm good with the rest of them.
All right, now I'll ask my question again. Are we all right then to say that we don't have any particular questions about anything else in this spreadsheet? And we indicated to these folks what we would like to see before we look at this again on December 17th. Are we in agreement with that?
Thumbs up.
Okay, and we're not voting tonight, so that's what we will do. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Moving
thank
on.
you.
Thank you for answering our questions. All right. Let's move then to the 2025 bond project budgets.
Good evening.
Will be Todd.
Mr.
Hello.
President, yes, Dr. Heller, Board of Education. Tonight was really a continuation from last, we'll do a little history for new board members, but the discussion tonight is the distribution of the bond program budgets and then the actual authority to proceed with the bond projects. What you'll see is in the 4 bullet points is the actual ballot language that we're bound to. So that's the ballot language that the voters voted on, that we are bound to, that all these projects fall within. A little different than we did in the last bond, you'll see this, and then the following page is a bunch of schools and numbers. The proposal this time is to load all the projects and project budgets at once within our business service or accounting software, so it's all done at one time. And then we can see all the schools at once. Additional to this, there was an email sent out today, just an update on the website that actually shows every school, the bond dollar amount, the scope, and then what bucket it falls within, all within a page. So the purpose behind that was just to show more transparency of like everything that's within this 99 million. So it goes through every school, all the way down to the bond management, to the issuance costs, where those are gonna be according to all the parts and pieces. So we can go through any of that you'd like to, but we will update that along with CBOC. They will actually, the proposal of the board would be for CBOC to actually take kind of a form like that is on the website and use that for a reporting tool, so we're staying consistent with reporting, and then also it aligns with our business service software. So there's really kind of 3 legs to it, but the hope is that, what's not the hope, the goal is to show what's on the website and then have CBOC review that, and then actually use that as a reporting tool from the Citizen Bond Oversight Committee to the board. So that's the plan with the numbers. You'll see as you go through the memo, really the recommendation of this is 2 pieces. So there's a lot of stuff in the memo, there's a lot of numbers pages and verbiage about the different pieces of procurement. What this is doing is allocating the bond funds, the budgets, and then by board policy, we have to actually say that there's that staff is authorized to sign contracts to proceed with the projects. So there's a lot of details and pieces within this memo, and I know there's been a lot of conversation up to this point. So if there's any questions, that's all I have for this memo. But please let me know, and that'll be for approval December 17th.
All right, Alexandra.
Yes, so where do these numbers come from? Like, I mean, I sort of have an idea, but like, why is Berthoud High 1.7 million and, Big Thompson is 1.98 million? Or like, are these based on like specific projects at those places or estimates or what? Like, explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we take Berthoud High, for example. It's based on priorities. So off of all the district's priorities, say the maintenance I think is in the 350 million right now. Berthoud High has, I don't have the exact numbers, but the 800,000 towards roofing, HVAC, and those pieces. So it was all done off priorities of either security, maintenance, or growth. Those are 3 buckets. And so that's how all the numbers are put together.
So these are taking sort of like the top priorities for each place and an estimate of what it will cost to fix those.
Correct. And a note, in the maintenance, ish is around 40 million in maintenance needs. Our critical needs are actually in the 80, and the maintenance needs for the next the next 5 years are in the 350 million. So it's taking all the maintenance needs, taking the top priority at each school and putting them in. And that was done with those staff input, NPC looked at it, so it wasn't just moving things over, there was staff input, outside, engineers looked at it. And then we had, MPC also review the contents of it.
Okay. And then what if, so like Carrie Martin is allocated $724,900. What if they end up only spending $600,000? What happens to that other money? Or vice versa, what if they need $800,000?
If they go over, so we'll actually come to the board and say, we over, this, something happened, whether it be cost increase, we'll come back and say, we need another $100,000 to finish this piece. Because what we're obligated to do is the list that's on the website, is finish those pieces. So if it's over, we'll come to the board and say, we're over budget, we need to reallocate somebody from here to here. If it's under, the proposal is to keep the money at the schools, so it doesn't become, a major shift, because there's high priorities at every school. So it's really to say, we'll go down the list. Candidly, I could say that there's not much money here.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of dollars, but when you're talking about this major repairs, we're gonna be pushed to meet the budgets that are here with the inflation, tariff cost, all the pieces. So the best hopes are is that it's under. By experience, and what we're already seeing, that we're pushing all budgets already.
Okay, thank you.
You covered a lot of what I had. The only other thing I had was, I'm wondering if we have any economies of scale built into this. So I know we have the themes, right? Like we are dealing with security. So in some cases, what I remember from last time was like, we really tried to do all the roofs, and because we did so many roofs, that was actually something that helped us by doing more of them all together. I'm wondering if you have any projects like that.
We do. So we actually just met with CDE last week for BEST grants. So we're proposal now, we're just in the initial phases, is putting all the roofing in one BEST grant, all the secure vestibules in one BEST grant, and then also we're looking at like a Bill Reed, it's a pretty unique project, into a BEST grant. So yes, and the goal is to actually contract them more by like areas, so we can go do these roofing jobs or these secure vestibules. So yes, to answer your question, that is the plan, it's scheduled in a way that we can do most of that. I mean, you can't the whole thing.
It's not
but
perfect, but yeah.
No, and that's the reason we, Bertha and Ivy are up first, because those are the largest projects with the biggest risk. That's a good scale right there. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, I have a couple of questions, Todd. When I looked at part of the information that I received that was in more detail, I noticed that in the discussion of what was going to be done at Ivy and Berthoud Elementary, that regarding classrooms, the word possible was added in terms of what work would be done. And so my question is, since the Berthoud area is the one that's growing most rapidly, probably has the most need for expanded classroom numbers, I was curious as to why this was called possible classrooms, if one of the selling points of the bond issue was to expand the school.
It is, and that's really specific to, so Ivy will have classroom additions, it'll have a gym and classroom additions. When we looked at Berthoud, most likely it will. What we didn't want to do was to say it'll have 1, 2, 3
Sure,
classrooms.
I understand that.
And the reason for that, we haven't really done the programming.
All right.
We know it's gonna be a 4-round school, so 4, grades per round, or 4 classrooms per round. The other thing we found on initial investigation is the programs that are already there, there's some efficiencies with where they're at. So then we might not need a full classroom built if we take this classroom that's not being used efficient and do something else with it. So in the end, they'll both be the increased capacity and the 4-round school. It's just maybe done a little different ways, but so that's why we didn't want to say it's going to be 3 rooms when actually it could be 2. So
I understand that. It's just that the word possible kind of scared me a little bit, like we're expanding a school but not expanding classroom space. My other question, and you and I have talked about this, and I know it may not be feasible or even wise to erect a sign at each of the schools like we did for the last bond issue. with an indication of what's supposed to happen there, and then check marks put as various things are done, because the amounts are certainly less. But I think it's really important that we convey to the taxpayers in some way that the money that they approved has actually been spent at all of the buildings in the Thompson School District. And you don't need to give me an answer to this tonight, but as you talk with Tammy and so on, I would appreciate hearing somewhere down the line how we're going to let the voters know that we spent the money that we asked them for.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say, we are coming up with a plan of what that'll look like.
Okay.
For that. Yeah, there's a little bit of a challenge in this one, because you look at Ferguson, for example, it's 14,000, so we're not gonna
Yeah.
get assigned. So we're trying to find out a balanced way. Bertha and Ivy, it'll be, I'll say more extravagant, there'll be more there for it.
Sure.
But at all the schools, just do something either in the main entryway or outside.
Sure.
To show them work.
And some of the schools that are newer obviously
Yeah.
don't require the amount of work or have the need. So anyway, I made my point. Nancy, I remembered.
So, I think the email that you sent out where you had the link and you put together that list, you know, based on the email that I had sent out saying, you know, isn't there some way to make it easier? So I really appreciate that. I think, you and the team, it came out really great. It's really easy. And I get it, you know, these are estimates, you know, you might have to modify them, but it makes it a lot easy for people to just go to one page, even for a board member, and see like what's the dollar amounts for these different items, safety and security, and it all adds up. And then I also see that you've kind of listed out that basically, just rounded, it's about 5.7 million for contingencies. So I'm guessing that that's where, when there's some of these overages, that's the money where it will tend to come out of, those two different ones.
Correct, yeah, so we'll have, so yes, that'll cover any unforeseens. We'll also have, when we sell the bonds, we're not gonna quote a premium tonight, I've already been pushing for a number. But when that'll also go into a contingency amount so we'll show that, and then we also worked out with the monthly interest made, that'll go to that same bucket, so
Mhm.
then we can track that through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just think this was, I just appreciate the response that you came back with to my email, cause I think this will just make it really easy for citizens and the board to just look at and say, oh, there's the money, that's what it's gonna be spent on.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Great. Okay, Denise? Mike?
Yeah, I have a few questions, just really quick. The BEST grant, what's the anticipated award or decision?
We have to do a intent to submit, and then we have to submit, I think this year is March, and then we'll know by June-ish, right around there's a time.
And
frame.
in terms of numbers, what are you talking about?
So it's our match, so we get 30%. So we have to give, or they give 30% to the project, and we match the 70%. So it's significant. I mean, when you're talking, I think we have 15 million roofing, so it could be another 4 million then in roofing-ish.
Yeah,
Good.
no, I think that's great. I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah. And I will say, this is best probably last year of funding. I don't say all funding, but they're anticipating over $2 billion with the request and about 200 and some million worth of approvals. We've had a decent track record in the past, so we're using the same process of consultants to go through that.
Cool. So just a kind of a technical kind of, you've already addressed it a little bit, but I just was curious about the date, because I've gotten burned by this, when you do the estimates and when you do the bidding. When were those estimates derived, and did you build in escalators?
So we did. So for example, if you look at Ivy, we got some pretty solid estimates like a year ago. And then every project was scheduled in escalation. So we put in anywhere from 2 to 4% per year. So if it was done, if it's not done until 28, we scheduled in 2, 4, and like 3% per year, kind of estimated its escalation. So those are, that's actually in one of the line items. There's that escalation.
Escalation,
Yeah. The risk is, I mean, honestly, there's so much, complications with tariffs and scheduling and different materials, it's.
Could be low.
Yeah, I mean, it's a risk, and that's why the two projects, Bertha and Ivy, we're going on like right now. Because it's when you look at the percent of, tariffs or escalation out there on $40 million, it's a significant amount that we've gotta manage through.
Yeah, no, that's tough to predict. So I asked you this privately, but I want to ask it to you publicly as well. Can you just talk through the construction approach that we're using? Because I'd asked about if we're doing hard bid, and I think it's helpful to understand.
Yeah, so on these, it's a similar state, well, it is a state approved contract for a design build. What's a little different is we hired the contractor, they actually hired the architect contract underneath them. And the reason for that is, with the complexity of these projects and the timelines we're on, it really, we give them the scope, the budget, and then they've gotta get this design and construction in this timeframe. And so, you've gotta have a partner that, you can trust, because it's one, there's a lot of community, input and risk, and then the dollar risk, the contingency risk, and then how they actually do that. There's few contractors that'll take on these types of projects, because they're intense and not fun. Can you imagine trying to shuffle a building around with 400 or 500 kids there? Can impact the education system, and they know that. So the design build system is what we use contract for these types of projects. Or they have what's called a CMGC, Construction Manager General Contractor, which is pretty typical across the state. And then we do hard bid or bid items as well. It's just depending on the type of project or complexity of it, because you need someone that is going to take care of the kids in the community and our budget, and we've got to get the right partners to do that. So
Yeah, thank you for that. I have one more, and I want to kind of build off of where Stu was going earlier, and I kind of want to direct this to Dr. Heller, kind of let you off the hook on this one a little bit. I don't think, if all we do is signage, I will be really disappointed. I would really like to see a full marketing plan, how we're going to promote this to the community, and I don't think, just me personally, you probably have a lot on your plate with the construction, but I think that's something that needs to happen at a high level. How we're going to promote it, I mean, community tours, promotion through social media, through other kind of our print media colleagues, and how we're going to be more outward about what we're doing and how we're benefiting the community. And I really would like to see that, because I do think, I just really think that we need to kind of respect the voters and kind of hope, because I'd like to, we're going to need to ask them for more. So so I want to kind of make sure that we do that. So
Yeah, no, we've had a number of conversations. In fact, right before we came down today, Mike and I met with Todd, and we started talking about a lot of that in terms of what are the variety of ways that we can promote that. You said yes, and we appreciate it. Here's actually the work that's in progress. So as construction projects are undergoing, doing videos that are posted on social media, doing a variety of ways. Yes, signs on those things are going to happen as well. I think as these bigger projects, right, as we're talking about, Ivy and Bertha, like, we want to do community tours. I know that happened in the past as we were doing some of the other bigger building projects where we actually took tours of these and led community members through. So yes, we want to do all of those things, because to your point, this is not the last time we're going to have to say this. $99 million was nice, but our total number is $750 million in needs as a district. We're going to have to continue to do things like this. So we have to also both thank the voters, but also show them evidence of progress along the way, so that they can, in some ways, celebrate themselves, their impact on the school district. So you're absolutely right.
And I would encourage you to brand it,
Yeah.
and create a building for whatever,
Yes,
something,
right.
and so
Yeah.
that it's something that's memorable. And so, anyways, but I'll look forward to seeing.
Yeah.
All right, Todd, do you need any more information from the board?
I do not. The only piece that I'll highlight is the applications for CBOC. I think they close Friday?
Close the 10th, I think.
It's next week.
Next week, okay. And we will go through a selection process in January for that committee.
And the board is involved in selecting that.
Yeah, so typically it's when the president or vice president have gone through the applications and selected on their own. And as I mentioned in the email today, that's also a board's opportunity. If you want to see something or you're wondering about something, reach out to CBOC, and there's a structure there to say, go ask staff about this, or we'll work into this a little bit, understands.
So how have you already notified the community that this opportunity is available? Through what means?
Through
have you
Mike's
guys-
team, go ahead, Mike.
Sure. So, we had an announcement in the November newsletter that went out, and then earlier this week, there was a blast that also went out to all district families and staff members, and then we have a big social media campaign that's going to also, that's inviting people to apply, telling them where we have the slots available. And so
Okay.
too. So the application's available, and the application is available on the website for CBOC, where it also talks about what they do and how they work.
Mike, are you considering doing anything with print media for people who aren't involved
I'll check. I
electronically?
mean, with social, what we've learned with social media, especially since we need to go to a link to learn more about, but that's a good way for us to push that out. I'll check and see.
Okay.
I certainly would recommend, obviously as board members, if you have people that you think would be good fits for this, to encourage people to apply as well.
How many people will be on the committee?
There's 16.
16, okay. All right. Thanks for your work on this.
Yep.
All right, we'll move on then to item 3.3, which is the preliminary 2026 mill levy certification. And Zach is here to talk to us.
That is me. Good evening, board members, Dr. Heller, President Boyd, congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you.
So this is my
I
first
think.
time presenting, so my name is Zach Mosier, I am the finance director, I am sitting in for Bob Ebersol. He had surgery on his shoulder, and so he asked me to fill in for him, so I'm here to present the preliminary mill levy rates that will be finalized at the next board meeting on the 17th. So, let me get my notes here. So, basically, I think the thing that we're just going through here. This is done every December for our mill levy rates, and really, I think that I'll just kind of cut to the chase here, because like on the heels of Todd, we're talking about the bond rates. I wanted to clarify that on this slide deck here, the net asset valuation is correct. The $3.7 billion is the correct amount. The TIF amount is actually $228 million. So it adds up to that valuation is correct, but I just kind of wanted to clarify before we go into that. So as you can see, those are the proposed mill levy rates, and they have overall they have slightly declined. Really, when it comes to like what caused the decline, where in the overall mill levy rates are the evening out of the 99 and the 2006 MLO rates, because those taxes are capped out at $7.5 million and $6.5 million respectively, and so that's really when we're looking at the memo, the 0.078 decline is really kind of caused by that. But when it comes to making sure that we're all acute to the making sure that the bond redemption allocations are the same, they are in fact the same at 6.075% with the 2025 bond redemption and the 2018 bond redemption amount. So so we're still holding true to that ballot language. So the net projected amounts to be generated through that is $165 million, $24 million over the last valuation on the mill levy rates. There was one question about the escalation on the 2018. In the amortization on that particular debt service, starting this year, it does escalate from $7 million to $15 million. And so that 4.2 mill levy rate will cover that escalation, but there is adequate room in the 6.075 to cover the new debt service rate. And I don't want to take too much thunder from Hilltop Securities as to their presentations, but we've gone over and everybody's strategized as to making sure that the mills will cover those net new debt service rates. So, with that, let me see if there's anything more to add than that. But that is the short and sweet of the whole bit. So I'll open it up for questions, see if anybody has anything, questions or comments.
Okay, Dawn, we'll start with you this time.
No questions, thank you.
My question doesn't necessarily have to do with the numbers that you presented. The district also has a mill levy oversight committee. That may not be the complete name of it, since we, for a while, have not, voters have not passed a mill levy override. Does that committee continue to function in what I'm gonna call off years?
That's a good question. I would have to defer to Bob. I can forward
Okay,
that
it
question on because I'm
continues. It does
not.
continue. It does continue.
It does continue?
Okay.
Okay.
It's specific to the 2018 mill levy override. And
Yes.
that's still,
And
now, the
that's-
committee has not, it's had some really sporadic meetings because there's just been different issues
Sure.
with changeover and stuff, so the committee hasn't met a lot, but I foresee that, this coming year that'll probably change.
Okay.
so.
That answers my question. Thank you. Nancy?
The only thing cause me and my numbers.
Right.
So, it was really great for you guys to send over that amortization schedule,
Mhm.
because I saw how the 2018 bond redemption had really jumped up, more than doubled.
Right.
And so when I saw that, it was like, oh, we had like you said, the payment escalates, and so I think that's important information for the community to be aware of, because everybody gets in their head, all these property values, they've increased, so the bond redemption rate should reflect that, but having that information to be able to explain, like, well, it's because there was a payment escalation. Previously, we've been paying a much lower amount, and now we're ramping up the payback on the bond, and so I think that's really good information. As I think also, just what your point about making sure people understand on the 99 and 06 mill levy overrides, that those did go down because, again, the ballot language capped us at how much tax. The 2018 did not cap, which is why still at the 7.6, so, but it was really good information, and I think even at the December 17th, if you're presenting again, to just again highlight so that the community really hears that the overall did go down, but the biggest reason it didn't go down more is because of that 2018 bond escalation. I think that will help people understand better.
Yeah, and one of the things that I hopefully has been communicated is my sense is that like people will still see a slight escalation in their property taxes, but it's not because of the bond redemption fee. It's because, as you can see, and hopefully everybody had a time to review, because I sent out a spreadsheet without that you're talking about, but the SFA, the School Funding
Yeah, it went up
Act,
slightly.
is the driver in that still, but that is kind of something that hopefully has been messaged. I hadn't been a part of those conversations, but I just wanted to highlight that.
Lori?
Having the why, I think, is very important, explaining, like Nancy brought up, as to, hey, these numbers are going down because there's a cap. And I think that just truly does help the public to understand, hey, they're gonna, like I said, they're probably gonna see their taxes go up, but having the why and an explanation definitely does make it easier.
Yeah, and I wanted to, I'm not gonna see what you guys are gonna talk about, but we've thought about like how that works together, like the escalation of the 18 amortization with our new rates, and then one will fall off after the other, so we have maneuverability to, when it comes to our finances, so,
Okay. Denise?
My questions have been covered.
I'm good. You're good? Alexander?
I'm good.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, then I will move into my next spiel.
I do want to just really quickly though on this mill levy authorization, we will have to have a special meeting because we will find out the mill levy rate on December 10th. We have to have that submitted by December 15th, that is before our next board meeting.
Oh.
While we are in CASB, we will have to schedule a special meeting to just authorize this one piece. So just as a heads up, we're not sure exactly date and time yet, but we will have to do that between now and between the 10th and the 15th, we have to get that done.
Okay. All right, you're on
Well,
with your other hat on.
just wanted to give you a update on the ACFR status. So we are on track to provide at least a preliminary draft of our ACFR on the 17th. I'm meeting with our auditors, Clifton, Larson, and Allen, frequently. I met with them today, and we're actually stepping up the meetings that we're having just to make sure that we're on track. So it seems like everything is going smoothly. There are some outstanding items. For example, we always have our certificate from GFOA, which I submitted back in March, and I'm still waiting for it. So hopefully it will be coming soon. But things like that are kind of loose ends that we're just tracking for. So we're feeling good about being able to present a draft on the 17th because we do have to submit those to the state by December 31st, and we're on track from that to do that. One thing that I will note, because of a lot of things, including the government shutdown, that the OMB has guidelines for the auditors to conduct our single audit, and that has been delayed, and so that component of it will still be able to submit to the state our financials, but another part of that is the single audit that we have our, primarily our grants that meet above a threshold $1 million, and we do single audits on those, but because of this delay in the guidelines that the OMB gives, that is going to be delayed, and we will have to file an extension for that, but that's known. We're not the only ones in that boat. Everybody's been affected by that, but it's nothing that has, I just wanted to highlight that because that will be another kind of thing that we'll have to negotiate after the new year. So, but nothing to fear, and everybody is aware of it. It's just kind of a just how things shook out with the federal government. So, just wanted to let you know that. So, does anybody have any questions with that process or anything like that?
I'm the first questioner this time, Zach, and I don't have a question, so.
Okay.
I don't really have a question, I only have a request in that, before the 17th, I know as soon as you possibly are able to, if you could get us sent the copy of it so that we have time to really go through it, and I know that not everyone reads them, I'm probably the only board member, but, but, so we can read it before we vote on it on the 17th.
Okay.
I know you might be restricted by, depending on when it's finalized and when the auditors get all their stuff done, but, because it's usually a pretty lengthy document, so.
Yeah, we will definitely do that, and I will keep Bob and the board abreast on the progress of that. We're working extremely hard to making sure that we're making that deadline. So the closer we get to that, I will definitely let everybody be aware of what the status is, so you can review that as soon as possible.
Thank you, and I know that you guys have done some really great work this year, putting a lot of new things and processes in place, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah. You're welcome.
All right. Okay, Denise?
I'm good.
Mike? I'm good. Alexandra? And Don? All right. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you much.
Thanks.
You guys are up, Bonji.
All right. So we're moving to agenda item 3.5, the approval of bond issuance documentation.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. I thought it might be a little helpful to kind of start off I know we have some new faces here this evening since the last time we were up here in August. So just want to do some introductions and kind of explain who we are and what we do. So my name is Maddie Pradanovic. I work with Hilltop Securities. We are the district's municipal advisor. That is a regulated entity by the SEC. We are licensed. We have a fiduciary responsibility to the district to act in your best interests through the issuance of municipal securities in the public market, which in this instance is the bonds that were authorized at the election last month, which I should have started by saying congratulations. I know that was a big feat and a big push. And then I'll hand it over to Kim and Courtney to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kim Crawford. I'm with Butler Snow. We've been working with the district for a couple years now. We are your bond counsel and disclosure counsel. What that means is that we help with the election, drafting the ballot question, working with Laura Lee and all your counties to make sure everything is done correctly and on time so that it gets to the voters and so it's the same in every county. So we will do that, and then once the election passed, we provide the legal documentation. We draft the bond resolution and the documents that were in your packets for tonight for discussion to make sure that the bonds are issued pursuant to state law. We can give an opinion that the bonds are validly issued and that they're tax exempt, which is what most of your investors want to know. And then we also provide a disclosure document, which is not in your packets yet. It's called a preliminary official statement, which is like a prospectus. And so it provides information that your staff has been working really hard on that gives investors all of the information that they think they need to make a qualified or an informed investment decision before they buy your bonds. Courtney.
My name is Courtney DeGardi, and I also work at Butler Snow with Kim as your bond counsel, so thank you for having us.
And then the one other participant in this transaction, there are a lot of folks, but the other one that's important for you all is Stifel Nicholas. They are the district's bond underwriter. They were selected through an RFP process a few years ago. They are the ones that actually buy the bonds from the district and then go sell those to investors. And so we work with them as your advisor to help negotiate pricing and all those types of things, make sure you're getting a fair interest rate, and kind of oversee a bit of that process to make sure those are being marketed, appropriately and to the correct investors, and resulting in an overall positive transaction at the end. So this evening, you have a number of documents in the packet. You obviously are not making a decision this evening. This is really just a briefing for us to kind of explain what those documents are, primarily the resolution and what they do, so that you all are able to make an informed decision to move forward at your next meeting. Speaking to kind of the plan here for the issuance, so obviously voters authorized the issuance of $99 million at the election held last November. Even though voters said yes, you all actually still formally have to take action to go issue the bonds, which I know feels a bit repetitive, but is required. That is what the resolution, that authorizing resolution does, which we'll get into that in a little bit. As Kim mentioned, district staff and the overall financing team is in the beginning stages of this transaction process. There's a lot of work that goes into this, particularly that preliminary official statement that Kim mentioned. A lot of it is derived from the financial information in the ACFR and budget documents and things like that. The bond issuance process, we typically say from start to finish, takes about 3 to 4 months. The first 2 months of that is typically kind of drafting of those documents and getting those in good shape. That following month is talking to the rating agencies, which I'll chat about in a minute. And then that last month or last few weeks there is actually marketing those bonds to investors, pricing, and then closing, delivering proceeds to the district so that you can go build the projects that Todd described in his presentation. So as of right now, this is our current timeline. So we are obviously here with you this evening, planning on having you all consider that authorizing resolution at the board meeting on December 17th. And then in January is when we will start the conversations with the rating agencies. So the district's currently rated by Moody's and Standard & Poor's. Those are 2 of the 3 common rating agencies that we work with, Fitch being the third that doesn't do a ton of general government work here in Colorado. The district's GO ratings, general obligation bond ratings from Moody's are AA2. For those that are not familiar, ratings have kind of a sliding scale starting at AAA, that's the highest. And then in that AA category for Moody's, it's a 1, 2, 3. For S&P, it's plus, neutral, minus, because why would it be the same? And then below that, below AA, we into the single A category, and then triple B, and then we're kind of going below investment grade. The district has really strong ratings in that AA category, so again, AA2 from Moody's, and then a AA minus from S&P. We call that a split rating, that difference, because essentially S&P is rating the district one notch below where Moody's is rating the district. That's very common here in Colorado. Moody's gives you an extra oomph for the lockbox feature that is inherent to Colorado School District General Obligation bonds, because those revenues that are collected from the mill levies that Zach was just mentioning from that 6.075 mils is automatically placed with the custodian. The district cannot access it for anything other than to pay debt service, and so you get a little bit of a credit bump from that perspective from Moody's for that. We've been chatting with Stifel about how many ratings we actually think we need on this transaction. If we were talking 10 years ago, we would say $100 million you definitely need to have, or 99 million, I should be very specific here. You need to have 2 ratings on that. That has changed a bit over time. We really tried to go to as few ratings as possible, while with the investor still accepting the rating, if that makes sense. So what we don't want to do is, if there's a large pool of investors that need 2 ratings on this transaction size, we don't want to limit their ability to bid on the bonds, basically, because we want the most investor participation we can get to be able to drive down the district's borrowing costs. However, ratings are expensive, so a rating fee for this size, we would say, is probably in the $110,000 to $115,000 range. And so we also don't want to put unnecessary issuance costs in the transaction, unless we deem there to be a material benefit from an interest rate perspective. So we've been having those conversations. I actually just spoke with Stifel on my way up here, and I think we likely are going to be able to go with just the 1 rating from Moody's in this transaction, which will save on those issuance costs, providing more funds for district projects, which is great. So we will have that call with them sometime in January and get the rating back from them. We do not anticipate any material changes in those ratings sitting here today. And then we are targeting a pricing that first week of February and closing shortly thereafter. The one caveat I will say is audit timing, because we do want to make sure that we have that done and in place when we go to post that preliminary official statement, that disclosure document. So timeline may change a bit depending on kind of where that all lands out, but for the most part, we don't anticipate any issues getting you funds, certainly by the end of Q1. Again, hopefully targeting that mid-February timeframe.
Maddie said posting, but
yes.
You post your official statement.
Yes.
We put it on, they put it on a website, and it's a website that investors commonly go to. They know to go to this website, and that's where they go to look for bonds. So that's what the posting of the POS, preliminary official statement, not preliminary official statement, POS.
It is a public document, as is the final document. I also should note that it does obligate the district, not that document, but an appendix to that document, the continuing disclosure agreement, does obligate the district to continue to provide certain financial information on an annual basis to the market. That is usually satisfied just by providing your audit, basically, on this public forum, but I do just want to note, because that is a requirement. And then the one piece that I just want to highlight, and I know Zach already touched on this, obviously the question that was posed to voters was a no increase in the district's mill levy rate for its debt service of 6.075 mils. We do not have any issues doing that. I know some of the questions I think that have come up around the 2018 authorization, 2019 bonds, those were structured to be slightly back-end loaded due to the tax impacts that were communicated at the time, and so as the district's prior bonds matured essentially this month, then those 2019 bond payments will step up. We'll have a somewhat similar structure for these bonds, or we anticipate doing so, although we will be able to front load a bit more than we did for the 2019 bonds, which obviously reduces overall interest costs of the district and is fiscally prudent. So that's a positive this go around that we didn't necessarily have last time. Okay, so moving into the specifics of the resolution. So it's a somewhat lengthy document, but not as long as if you were looking at like a city ordinance authorizing something like this. There are a few key pieces of this. Kim will tell you there's probably a lot more key pieces than I care about, because she's an attorney and that's what she does.
I forgot to tell you, we're attorneys.
Yes.
Courtney and I are attorneys.
I am not. And so The biggest piece is that it's authorizing the issuance of the bond, so the district to actually be able to enter into a bond purchase agreement with Stiefel to go sell the bonds to Stiefel as the underwriter, as long as we stay within a certain box. The box in this instance is pretty straightforward because it is essentially the parameters that were authorized by voters in the election question. There are a few others that I'll talk about in a minute, but that's the sort of main bread and butter of this. It also authorizes or delegates to certain individuals to be able to enter into those agreements, which I believe are the board president, superintendent, and chief financial officer. That is, I believe, stipulated in statute, yes. And then authorizes some of these other documents as to form. So those are from my perspective, the key takeaways, but I will let Kim and Courtney weigh in if I'm missing something material.
No, that's fine.
I think that was a very good overview. Again, like Maddie said, this is a parameters resolution that you'll be considering at your next meeting. So once this resolution is authorized, then the president of the board, the chief financial officer, or the superintendent can execute that bond purchase agreement. As long as the bonds are sold within these parameters, if that would, there's no way they can exceed these under this authorization. So it's kind of a safeguard, and like Maddie said, most of those come from your election question that was just approved. It also does authorize the form of the registrar and paying agent agreement, which is a pretty standard form with your trustee is, or your paying agent is UMB Bank. And then the continuing disclosure certificate, which Maddie also alluded to, is a securities requirement that investors like to see, and it's mentioned in the official statement. And again, the reporting requirements typically are your audit has to be posted, but that these documents are approved as to form, as well as the bond purchase agreement, which you will also get a copy of when at your board meeting next week or in 2 weeks. And then the other documents as to form any certificates, there'll be an omnibus certificate that goes through representations of the district, that there's no litigation that would impact the issuance of the bonds, things like that, and just other standard form certificates saying we certify this is where the money is going, things like that. That's all authorized in this resolution.
And then this last slide here are the, yep, there we go. You're one step ahead. Are the actual parameters that are in there with a bit of a descriptor. I'm not going to go through them in a ton of detail because I know this presentation was in your packet, but I do find this sometimes helpful to just kind of explain some of these are terms that are very specific to what we do and not what the general public might be familiar with. But as I mentioned, most of these parameters were primarily that $99 million maximum borrowing amount, and then the maximum annual of $19 million and total repayment of $195 million. Those were set in that ballot question that was approved by voters. The final maturity, we actually anticipate having a 20-year structure here, so final maturity in 2045. The parameter of 2046 just gives us a little bit of extra wiggle room just in case something happens, because and I don't think I stated this, if for some reason we don't meet these parameters, we cannot sell the bonds, we have to come back to you all to amend the parameters.
And most of them you have to go back to an election.
Right, yes, on the total repayment and max annual, which is why there's a little bit of buffer in there, because that's much more challenging to do than to come back to you all, right? And so, but primarily some of these other ones, we just want to make sure that we have a little bit of cushion. The optional redemption, municipal bonds are typically sold with a 10-year call option. So unlike your mortgage where you can go back and refinance at any point in time, municipal bond insurers want a bit more certainty in their investment. And so we were essentially prohibited or locked out from refunding or refinancing that on a tax-exempt basis for 10 years after issuance. So we would anticipate these bonds will have a call date in December of 2035, at which point anytime on that date or after, the district can refinance those bonds for interest rate savings or restructuring or what have you. And so the optional redemption language there is just basically saying that you are going to be able to redeem them, and if that were to occur at par, so we're not having you pay a premium there. And then the purchase price of the bonds, that's essentially what Stiefel is paying to the district for buying those bonds. We're saying that has to be at least 100%, so you have to at least get your full $99 million. As Todd alluded to, municipal bonds are typically sold with a premium, and that was the case when the district sold bonds in 2019, and the district was able to utilize those funds to fund, I believe, some additional projects that were, communicated to the board and community. We do anticipate, again, some premium here, interest rates, well, who knows, where interest rates go, as you all might imagine, it's been a bit volatile over the last year or so. But we do anticipate some premium sitting here today. The exact number, as I said to Todd, I will not be quoted on that. So, but that's something that we'll continue to provide to the district, and obviously they have a plan in place for if those funds do occur.
And premium is essentially treated as extra interest.
Yes.
For state law purposes, so that's how you pay it back, is essentially paying higher interest rates, a little bit higher to get more money. And it still has to fit within those ballot parameters. So no matter what the premium amount is, you still can't exceed that 19 million and the 195. So that it has to stay within those parameters for table purposes.
And then the final parameter, which should be somewhat self-explanatory, but is always a good check.
And why do we have to say this?
Is that we can't exceed your debt limit as allowed under statute, which is 20% of your assessed value. We are not close to running into that issue, but it's just a check, and I just put in there you have after issuance this was based on the preliminary, not I know Bob has been getting some of the final AVs from the assessors over the last week or so, but you would have a capacity remaining of about $500 million.
And the reason we put it in there is because sometimes districts issue or give voter authorization for a lot more than they're authorized for. Mm-hmm. So they might have like a 10-year plan of finance where they ask the voters, can we do $900 million, but there's no way they could issue it all at one time. Mm-hmm. So they get the voter authorization in advance, assuming that they can for that amount, but in their plan of finance. So we put it in to make sure that people are thinking about, what can we really issue right now, but we would adjust the par amount and stuff like that too to reflect that if that were the case. But we just put it in there for a check.
And that is it as far as what we have prepared, but happy to answer any questions.
All right, Nancy, we'll start with you.
I'm good.
Lori?
Nothing at this time.
Denise? Mike?
I have just a couple, kind of one question, perhaps, and a follow-up kind of dumb question. So just I'm looking at the attachment, or excuse me, Exhibit A. The fee schedule is not included. Is there a reason, or is
We
that?
just don't have it yet from the paying agent. It's usually like $500 a year.
Yeah.
It's minimal. But you have to have a paying agent.
Yeah, I understand that. I
Yeah.
just was curious, kind of because it was not included in terms of the process.
Yeah, usually I think it's about $1,000 that the district pays the paying agent at closing so essentially when we sell the bonds to kind of set up the accounts. They also help pay funds for cost of issuance and set up their accounts. And then I think
it might even be $250.
Yeah, I think it's like $250 a year that you pay basically per series of bonds for them. So what they do is, back in the day when people actually had physical coupons for their bonds, right? People are bringing those in person, and you're writing checks and so on and so forth. That obviously is all now electronically automated, but somebody does have to track who actually owns the district's bonds. So that is what UMB as the registrar is responsible for doing, and then they also remit the payment. Basically, the district provides the payment, dollar amounts to make the payments in June and December. And then they actually are responsible for sending those funds to bondholders instead of you having to directly send funds to people.
And they'll send you an invoice every 6 months.
Sure.
So they'll.
So I just was curious, the total issuance the total issuance cost, is it percent, or do we anticipate?
Yeah, for this, so we would say the issuance costs unrelated to the underwriter, I would guess for this will be about $300,000 to $350,000. And then the Stiefels fee, I don't think we have the fee finalized with them. We usually kind of negotiate that as we get closer to pricing, but that usually is somewhere in the $3 to $4 per par amount range. So you're talking about 300,000 or so here. So 600 total ish, yeah.
But that's less than 1%.
Yeah.
So since I'm new, so just please bear with me. Explain to me again. I want to understand a little bit more when you talked about the total annual repayment cost that not exceed the 19,000 or 109. It's authorized for 99,000, and I understand you're talking about just at a certain point if there's a maximum repayment?
Tabor requires that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the district will sell $99 million of bonds, and then when we're working through that structure, on an annual basis throughout the entire maturity structure, we cannot have an annual payment greater than that $19 million number, and then the total principal and interest over the 20-year period cannot exceed $195 million.
Okay, sorry, I was
No, totally fine.
misreading that incorrectly, so this was, that makes more sense.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
All right. Alexandra?
So, if Stifel is selling the bonds
Mhm.
to investors, who do we buy the bonds from?
So you are the ones issuing the bonds.
Do we just like make them out of nowhere?
No, we write them for you.
Yes, they do. There's paper documents that get
Dr. Heller.
physically signed to represent the bonds, right, and then a lot of it is then
To-
placed into an electronic
In
system.
$5,000 chunks.
Well, right, and that's what I was
Exactly.
reading too, in this thing, it talks all about these denominations of $5,000.
Correct.
You'll have bigger ones than that.
Okay, because I was like, I can't imagine we're doing this all with like.
No, so
10,000.
typically, so unlike a mortgage where, you know, say you're borrowing $100,000 and it's over 30 years and you're making monthly principal and interest payments, right? And that is all set on a singular dollar amount. So bonds, municipal bonds are actually sold in serial denominations, so there's actually a maturity schedule where each year there's a principal amount that's maturing, and that can be individually sold to a different investor. So your 2026 principal payment could be sold to one investor, and the 2027 principal payment could be sold to a different investor. And even within those years, we could actually sell it to multiple investors. It just really depends on who
And
the
you could
buyers
maybe
are
go
and
to
the
Charles
orders
Schwab
are.
and you could buy some
Correct.
in $5,000 denominations. So
Yes.
if you wanted to buy
Yes.
$10,000 of your bonds,
Make a Christmas.
Correct.
you probably
Yes.
make a great Christmas gift.
There's a form of the bond in the resolution.
Yes,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
there are, they're sold in $5,000 denominations. As Kim mentioned, I mean, when we're talking about institutional orders, we're seeing, you know, entities place orders for millions of dollars. You know, there will be certain buyers that will actually put in an order for the entire deal probably. We saw that a lot earlier this year. But that said, individuals can buy the bonds, so sometimes you'll see, we call those a retail order for, you know, $15,000 or $20,000, right? So it just kind of depends, but yes, by and large, the majority of municipal bond investors, particularly in new money issuances like this, are gonna be your large institutional buyers. You may have like a Charles Schwab or a Morgan Stanley or something that are buying it to then go sell to their retail investors, but on our end, it looks like a institutional investor. Okay, yes.
Don't. And I don't either. I don't have any questions, so
Great.
thank you
Well,
very much.
thank you all this evening, and again, congratulations.
Yeah,
And we'll see you in a couple of weeks, right?
Yes.
Okay.
she retired.
She did.
She did.
She's
Yes.
wonderful.
She is wonderful.
I long time ago.
You worked with her a long time? Sally.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 3.6, calendar recommendations for the 2026-27 and 2027-28 school years.
That seems really far from now.
It really doesn't, but it sounds like it
Yes.
is.
Mr. President, board members, Dr. Heller, Tiffany Rogers, Chief Human Resources Officer, and I will introduce the folks that will be presenting with me this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Heller, Mr. President, board members, Valerie Laura Black, I'm the Director of Human Resources. Thanks for having me.
Good evening, I'm Carol Thomas, a fourth grade teacher at Garfield Elementary School, representing elementary on the calendar committee. Nice to meet you all.
Good evening, I'm Sue Timer, President of the Thompson Education Association.
Thank you guys for having us. We want to talk about the 2026-27 and 27-28 school academic calendars. First off, starting with, this is in accordance with the policy ICA, where the Board of Education is responsible for adopting the district calendar. And then prior to the end of the year, the board shall determine the length of time in which schools in the district will be in session during the school year, the number of hours and days of teacher-student instruction, and teacher-student contact to be consistent with the board's definition of actively engaged in the educational process. Meet or exceed the requirements of state law and include a sufficient number of days to allow Dr. Heller, flexibility in creating a calendar that supports the district's educational objectives. So that's why we're here this evening, is to present that calendar. The next slide we'll talk about is on what the calendar committee consists of. The calendar committee considered, what we're presenting to you is considered feedback from the community, a actual calendar survey that we sent out, guidance from the negotiations team, district policy, and state guidelines to develop the calendar that we're presenting to you today. We're bringing forward a 2-year calendar, and that is in line with the calendars we've done in the past several years ago. It was requested by our community to have a calendar that supported a longer schedule to be able to plan ahead. So we're bringing the 2 school academic years. There is a typo in the board memo that you guys received. We did put down an incorrect date for the board meeting. We do know it is December 17th that we'll be bringing this back to the board for approval. And so we want to review that with you today so you have time to provide your feedback to us on questions, comments, concerns, things that we need to look at, because we'll be meeting again as a committee prior to that.
We just got excited because we have a last committee meeting on the 9th, and we're really looking forward to that date.
Yes. Yes. So the calendar committee, do you want to go back one? There we go. Our calendar committee members, Dr. Lessman was on our calendar committee as the board representative. You can see we have 17 people on our committee. We have representation of classified staff, parent, elementary, secondary, high school, teachers, middle school, TEA, and we also have our assistant superintendent from learning services, early childhood. So we have a great representation, operations, to speak into the calendar committee. So it was a great committee to be part of. It was my first time, so I enjoyed it. And the other piece is that I'd like to thank all the members of the committee for the time they invested in, because it's a lot of discussion, a lot of review of data, things like that to come up with the calendar. I'd like to thank Valerie Laura Black for leading our committee for us. And lastly, our community members who took time to complete the survey, and Valerie's going to talk about that in terms of our community and what they did, how much participation we had, and a little bit about the survey results that we did receive from the community.
Yeah, so we're really excited to present these numbers to you because the participation from our stakeholders was just astronomical. It was outstanding. We nearly doubled the amount of participants for this survey from the survey that we administered in 2023, which is the last time we did our 2-year calendar survey. Notable, which I think is really important to share, is that we had more than double the amount of students who participated in the survey. So in 2023, we only had about 116 students that participated and gave their input, and this year we have 305, which I think is great. They also gave a lot of really insightful comments. They shared a lot of their own opinions about what they think their calendar should look like. Very thoughtful. So I think that that's something that we should share with you. We also had a lot of participation from community members, district employees, people who were playing dual roles. So it was really good to get everyone's perspective. We're not quite sure why we got a lot more participation, but I have some assumptions about why that might be. It was a very short turnaround time, so it didn't linger. It's not like we had the survey open for several months where we gave a lot of people optimal time or too much time, really. It was just that nice sweet spot amount. It was also a different type of survey. So the 2023 survey asked for a lot of written feedback from our constituents, from our stakeholders. This survey allowed the participants to provide rank order items and then asked for what feedback would you like for us to know about certain events, or what general feedback would you like for us to know. So I think it really allowed the community to share their thoughts in a way that was quick and easy, but also provided that opportunity for people to share things in narrative form if they would like. So that was important to note. I think the survey was a wealth of information, and we were able to turn that around into some committee discussion items, as well as having had such a variety of individuals participating in the survey. They had a lot of different lenses to look at things through. And so they took the data and looked at it through their own lens, as well as a broad lens of being a parent or employee, or when I was a student, this is how it felt. So there were a lot of those things. And then we also had a lot of staff members who are working in a variety of different capacities. So lots of teachers, a lot of classified staff, who could share their perspectives, so they were able to feed that information and provide life to the data as well, not just the numbers. So when we get into the calendar development, so you can go to the next slide, thanks Laura Lee. We wanted to take into consideration policy IC and ICA, which provides us with these general guidelines around what is the minimum number of hours and the minimum number of days we needed to include in the calendar. We brought the survey data to life. We also talked a lot about some information that was gleaned through our negotiations process. So you all know, and for those of you that are new, negotiations is representation from the board as well as representation from our Teachers Association. We come together and we discuss and come to agreements on certain topics that are really important and pressing in the life of our school and our district, so that our teachers can do their very best work for our kids. One of the items that came up was a need to increase or incorporate additional plan time for elementary staff, and we were able to take all of that information, put it into the machine, so to speak, with our committee, and then come up with some really great ideas for our survey. We will talk a little bit more about specifics in the calendar proposal. I'm gonna give you some highlights of the survey and some time to ask some questions about the survey also, and then Tiffany will share a little bit more about how that baked into the calendar. So overall, we had a very high satisfaction with the current calendars as they stand. So over 62%, almost 63% of the constituents and stakeholders said that they agree or strongly agree with the current 2-year calendar as it stands. It's getting ready to sunset at the end of this school year. In 2023, the survey indicated that of the stakeholders that took the survey, a little over 58% had that same sentiment. So we're doing better. We're responding to the needs of our stakeholders a little bit more accurately and meeting those needs. So I feel like that's a positive in terms of the progress. One of the questions asked the communities to rank order some of the calendar features, specifically around breaks, making sure that what we were providing, because some of the narrative that we explored in our committee, there were lots of elements around are breaks sufficient? Are they not sufficient? Are they timed appropriately? Do we need to adjust some things? These 3 features, there were a total of 5. These 3 features came in the top rankings. So wanting to have a 2-week winter break, making sure that we were maintaining 5 days for the fall or Thanksgiving break. What was really interesting was making sure that we ended first semester before winter break, and we had a lot of discussion around that, thinking creatively and critically around how semesters can fall. We had some competing also desires in terms of when we start school and when we end school, and it's kind of this like finite amount, and you can't bake everything into this dish, so to speak. And so we really needed to think through these pieces when we went into baking and to creating the calendar. So this was really important information for us to look at. We were also, I will mention, able to successfully put those elements into the calendar, so that was great. Let's see. And then another component here was talking about the really critical element of professional development for our staff. We really rely on professional development time to be able to engage in professional learning teams, formerly professional learning communities, but in terms of terms, but the way that we utilize our time is really important, because we don't want to get into a situation where we're taking time away from the kids and creating that sort of pitting one against the other. But the time that we spend with our staff in schools and across the district is really critical. So asking the community, how does this work for you? How do we make sure that we can still maintain that really important professional development time while honoring what the community's needs are? What we heard from them was that the 1 hour late start for professional development is preferred at that weekly clip, so it's predictable. We know when it's going to happen and what it's going to look like, over the previous mechanism for professional development, which was early release time. And that was a pretty significant adjustment for our community when that happened. But what we see from this data is that this is the preferred mechanism to be able to entertain professional development for our staff. And then we also received feedback from our community that quarterly professional development would be the preferred mechanism for being able to support elementary plan time, because the community really favored that less frequent time off and have it be at predictable times, and then attaching it to other days or other times where we were already having time off. So it wasn't, in a month we could have 2-3 day weekends. It was more in a month we might have a 4-day weekend that would allow families predictable time to have off and plan around those. And lastly, we did provide an opportunity for our community to provide additional comments. When we looked at what those themes were, there was no surprise, a very large response related to the heat concerns in our schools, and a large proportion of our community advocated for pushing the start days back. And as I said before, we had this finite sort of baking dish in which we needed to create the optimal calendar. And we wanted to acknowledge the advocacy that our community pushed forward to be able to start the year a little bit later in August so that students are not and staff are not in really hot spaces trying to do their best learning. And then there were other considerations that were suggested around, for example, a 4-day school week. There was also feedback around winter break being too long, which kind of is funny considering that one of the ranked items was having the 2 week at winter break. But I think what they were suggesting maybe is that trickle that happens. It kind of seeps out of the 2 weeks into the additional weeks, and so we were cognizant of that with our community too. I will add that the consideration for a 4-day school week, that is a much bigger conversation than can be entertained at a calendar committee meeting that occurs, 4 or 5 times over the course of 3 months. Yeah. And so that is something that we just want to acknowledge and share with the board, and just say, if that's a consideration, it will take a little bit more time to discuss. Okay. Any questions about the calendar survey data?
One comment I will make about the winter break piece, we did, one of the individuals who was a parent, community member parent, one of the concerns that they brought up regarding that was the fact that they're off for that period of time when the students are, and then they're required to go back to work, so it made it difficult to continue on past that normal kind of 2-week time frame of kind of right after that New Year's time frame. So that was kind of a discussion regarding that.
Questions from these guys on that part?
Any questions on that part? I'm not quite sure. I have some questions, but I'm not sure.
I think specifically around the survey.
Yes,
Around
survey.
the survey itself.
When you have the numbers up there, how many of them represent, when it came to like parent guardian, how many were from the same household, as well as same with like, say, the students, do we have a number of households that were represented? Because if you have, you could have 2 parents that both did, you could have 5 kids in the same household that did the survey because, maybe mom and dad or maybe their teacher encouraged them to do the survey.
So we didn't break it down by household. In fact, we were conscientious of the fact that we wanted to get as much data as we could from our community. So we didn't require people to name themselves or list their names as well. Sometimes that can be an intimidating factor. So we don't have data associated with that. We do have further data that we can break it down into secondary versus elementary, so levels. There's additional data that we could look at by household we don't have.
Okay. Denise, anything? Mike? Alexandra? Dawn? I do have a couple of questions that I think are related to the survey, and then I have a couple that I think are probably not. So, if I did the math correctly, 37.2% of the respondents to the survey weren't satisfied. Can you find in your information there what I'm referring to?
Yes.
That seems to me to be a fairly high number of folks who were not satisfied with some aspect. Can you elaborate on that?
So we also had an element in the survey that said that was like a neutral. So either way, I go either way. So
Okay.
sometimes when you have an element in a survey that is also neutral, you can calculate that as agreeing or not agreeing. We chose not to include that as part of our response that was indicative of agreement. And instead we allowed that to be part of the response that was not in agreement.
Okay.
So that number's a
So
little
that
bit
number's,
stronger.
yeah.
Can I also just add one piece of this, because first of all, to the team that worked on this, there's probably no more challenging committee to serve on in many ways than a calendar committee. I have done it many, many times myself, led calendar committees. And what we hear a lot from folks who want to tell us what they think the calendar should be is, I want to start after Labor Day, I want to end before Memorial Day, I want 2 weeks off for here, a week off for, they want everything, and we can't do everything. And so I think there's always going to be a level of dissatisfaction because we should be starting after Labor Day and you didn't do that, or we should be doing, right? And so there's always going to be a decent level, I think, of some dissatisfaction because there's just different philosophical beliefs of what a calendar should have. And one of the non-negotiables, at least for now, that we had to say was, we're ending first semester at winter break and starting second semester after winter break. If we ever want to have a conversation to do that differently, that's another big conversation, because that's a change in how instructional practices, for example, a high school student to go up to winter break and then leave for 2 weeks and then come back and spend 2 or 3 more weeks finishing up a semester. First, the kids aren't taking breaks then, they're not getting that winter break themselves, teachers maybe not. So that's another philosophical thing that almost creates a barrier. If you're going to end first semester at winter break, that writes most of your schedule for you. You have very little flexibility beyond that, especially if you're trying to do any type of balancing of first and second semester.
So I don't.
If I can elaborate just a little bit on what he just said, when I was teaching, our district had several years where winter break started and the students came back then for 1 more week. So you're nodding your head, you remember that. What a nightmare that was for teachers and for kids.
Yes.
And so that just a bit of an elaboration from somebody who lived through that nightmare and dealt with it. So go ahead.
The other discussion about winter break was the fact that if we have students in concurrent enrollment, they are finishing before winter break for concurrent enrollment, so it's indicative, especially from a high school setting, of how that progression happens.
My other question, I think, is related to the survey when people were indicating whether they preferred the late start or the early release. And since both of those relate to professional development, research says, doesn't it, that longer blocks of time for professional development are more effective from a teacher's point of view than having a little bit here and a little bit there. I see you're nodding your head. That was what I remember too, and I remember that as a practitioner, as a teacher, that rather than having frequent professional development, it was more valuable to me to have it more concentrated and over a longer period of time. So that takes care of my questions. Next.
Lori had one too.
Okay, one more question.
Okay.
In regard to the set date, I appreciate Dr. Heller having explained, hey, we have to start at X date for the start of school because of when the CMAS tests are given. Where is the pressure to put on to have, say, hey, why can't we do the CMAS, if we start on this date? Now, I know now with the winter break, that's going to truly come into play, but as far as, going up the food chain, so to speak, to have that become a reality, because maybe even for the rural communities, they might like to see changes, as far as, because you got older kids that are working in the fields and things like that, parents are counting on them for that, and other, I guess, variables to have a more flexible start date.
I have reached out to the state when we were dealing with the heat this fall, and I was the first one saying, why are we starting so early? And then I started realizing how locked in CMAS dates are.
Right.
So then I reached out to the state and did say, are you getting any other pushback from school districts who are wanting to start later because of heat and lack of air conditioning, but really feel like they can't because they're going to cut instructional days prior to really important testing windows? And I was surprised, I was the first person who'd ever brought this up to them, but they did say, we're willing to at least talk about it. The one thing I'm maybe a little bit more worried about is I is like College Board for things like AP tests and SAT. They will never change their schedule because that is
Right.
national. So we would definitely have kids in AP and SAT disadvantaged a bit if we were starting school even later, because we would not be able to change those dates. But I have at least asked, is there any chance that this would be able to be flexible? So.
Nancy, have you had a chance yet to ask questions on this
No,
particular topic?
Really, mine only is not even a question, it's just, an appreciation that for the professional development days, figuring out a way to make it more efficient, to have longer blocks. I mean, even for me, in my work, when I have some projects, when I try to just set aside an hour or two, I mean, I make some progress,
Yeah.
but it's when I block out an entire day, that's when I really, and so I think the professional development is the same way, and I think it'll just make it easier for the teachers to not have, reset, like, oh, PDO class, and I think it helps the students. So I think that's the one big takeaway I took from all of this with the survey and everything.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have more information to present to us, or can I
Yes.
ask you my two
No, we have more.
other questions?
This was like your intermission.
Oh.
And now here we are.
All
So
right.
I'm gonna pass the calendar from you. We figured it would be easier than putting them on a slide. 'Cause
Thank you.
my eyes are not that great, so I'm just gonna follow it. In terms of the proposed academic calendar, what we included, we actually were able to achieve a later start date for all TSD students to mitigate that heat-related concern. So actually, we'll begin a week later. Transition day will be on August 19th for our kindergartners, 6th grade, and 9th grade students. And on August 20th will be the official first day of school for all of our students. So that is a week later. Interesting enough, we did not know this at the time, but the Poudre School District is also doing the same. So they will be starting on the same day and to mitigate this heat-related concern piece, so we're in line with our neighbors. I think we did a great job of being able to meet almost all the marks that the committee, that was set by the committee in response to the survey. We successfully addressed the concerns about the heat, desired break times, the fact that we had the desired length of the fall break time of 5 days and the winter break time of 2 weeks. We were actually able, with the placement of no student days and professional development day, is to actually be able to achieve one less day of winter break. So we did give a little bit there to the community in terms of being able maybe to return to work for those that need to do that sooner. The completion of the first semester we were able to achieve prior to the winter break to support our instructional minute guidelines. More days were allocated, you'll notice, to second semester due to the prevalence of state testing and end-of-year assessments. So when you really calculate out that second semester from our testing requirements, it does actually place it a little closer to the first semester number. And we'll talk a little bit, I do want to express one thing at the end of this about kind of what I'd say was a maybe comment from our high school folks. So the imbalance in the number of days, we acknowledge that there's potential impact for that, for our secondary education folks. So in terms of that, we did, Shauna Culp, who is one of our high school teachers, was not able to join us this evening, but I wanted to read you her comments that she sent. Our process was we went through and voted on each item as part of the calendar, our professional development days where we placed things. And I would say in terms of the shortened number of days in that first semester, we got kind of a maybe from our high school representatives. And so what she would say is semester-long classes have almost 3 fewer weeks of instructional time for the first semester. This is particularly significant for any semester-long AP courses and all concurrent enrollment courses, as these have strict requirements about instruction and little room for adaptation or reduction of time. She said for context, 11 high school semester-long classes make up almost all of the classes in PE, industrial tech, art, business, music, and family and consumer science departments. And they make up almost half of all the classes in English, science, and social studies departments. She said another unintended implication is when instructional time is compressed, each assignment or assessment carries more weight. She said she appreciated the invitation to represent the high school perspective, but she said for those who have shared feedback with her, that they understand that these are only considerations and may not merit the rejection of the proposed calendar when it suits all the other grades. So she was more of the maybe category when we went and voted. And so that would be what she wanted to share with you guys this evening regarding the high school piece. Did you guys have any questions about her comments in particular that?
Was she the only high school teacher on the committee?
No,
We had
and two.
We had a high school principal as well.
Okay.
I think she was the only high school teacher.
But she also did, if I understand, did go out and try to facilitate, solicit feedback from
Yes,
other
she
teachers
did.
as part of the process.
And she's an AR, and we had discussions some about the calendar within the AR meetings as well. So she had opportunities to hear from people
Okay.
within her building and within others.
Just, to make sure everybody's on the same page of what we're referring to. First semester, if you'll notice at the bottom of that calendar, is 78 days. Second semester is 92 days. That is a significant difference. Sue and I talked about it this morning. We talked about it within cabinet. It's probably the biggest, if I'm going to use the word concern on the calendar, is that big difference. And that is in many ways directly reflected on when you start school 5 days a week later. It has a direct impact on the number of days if you're going to end before winter break, which is where that, again, to my comment earlier, if you end before winter break with first semester, then it locks in a lot of things. And if you decide to start school a week later, you are going to have an imbalance in instructional time. But from what I understood, the high school staff, though they weren't thumbs up on it, were thumbs sideways. And given the other things that they felt were good about the calendar, didn't feel like that one thing was enough to maybe offload.
Yeah, to continue moving forward with the calendar.
With that said, I realize that it's still a lot, but I also, in second semesters where you have all this testing.
Yes.
Now, I realize that has less of an impact in high school than it does in the other
Exactly.
grades. And so that definitely makes sense to me that high school would notice it more.
Yep.
But I think that does, take 5 days out from?
It's almost, we can calculate it to.
It depends
Depends on the level.
The
Yes.
level,
Okay.
yeah.
But it's
It can-
5
it
It could be 5 to 10.
ish.
It's a
Yes.
much more balanced schedule for elementary and middle because of the testing than it is for high school.
And AP testing typically is that first week of May, am I correct?
Yes.
So then those 2 weeks after that AP testing is kind of those 2 weeks that
Yes.
would differentiate the calendar numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I realize it's not perfect, but that does have significant impact on
Absolutely.
that difference between the two.
Yes.
Okay, thank you
Absolutely.
for that too.
We really wanted it to have more of an impact in high school. We kept trying to think it would. And
Yeah, we tried.
Right?
Yeah, teenagers.
We kept hearing it's not it.
Are you sure?
Did you get any feedback from high school teachers who teach semester classes, who would teach the same class first semester and second semester
Yes.
with 78 days in the first semester
Shauna
and
spoke to
92
that.
Yeah, Shauna
days
spoke
in the
to that.
second, in terms of expectations, in terms of basically creating another prep? And so you did get feedback on that and weighed that, okay.
That's the biggest, that's the thing, as a person who taught semester classes, that's the biggest thing I can see, and it is gonna have an impact, but there's gonna have to be some intentional planning when it comes to those teachers in terms of how do we make that balance make sense, to still make sure we are hitting those essential standards in both semesters.
The other thing we did discuss as part of that is that if we went back to the original start time didn't address the heat-related concern, if we were going to miss days because of heat-related concern, we would still end up with the same number of days, and the difference is our teachers would not have been able to plan for that. Now they know that there's gonna be less days, and hopefully we've mitigated that enough to not have the heat component. We shall see with global warming, we'll see. We might still have 90-degree weather in November before we're all done, but, any more questions about Shauna's, comments from a high school perspective? Okay. Professional development was scheduled purposely to support families, and facilitate teams. There was really time for intentional planning in the elementary grades, so we were able to successfully include the additional plan time that was negotiated as part of our negotiations last year, so we were to add those days. We were able to add those as full days, which I know you guys have discussed here today, is that the value of that time being a big block of time and not trying to add an extra hour here or there. So we successfully were able to do that. We were also able to pair those with other days off to meet the community's ask of creating those longer weekends. And then you'll see too that we have a small break in there in the April timeframe where we have the April 30th, which is our big long stretch between spring break and the end of the year. We do have a little bit of relief in that April month timeframe.
And can I add, as we looked at some of these, we also learned from Lamb Carroll that for early childhood, they need 2 solid weeks in any given month. One of these we counted like the 30th or whatever that went into next week. But they need 2 solid weeks without days out, which also made us adjust where we put some things.
So the consideration from EC to 12 was pretty deep across our entire system.
The other thing we were able to accommodate with some of the professional development scheduling is we had operations as part of our group as well. And so they discussed that when professional development days are after holiday, things like that, it does make it difficult because our, from a staff perspective, because our staff are enjoying that break as well, and we're asking them to come in and set up professional development. Sometimes it makes it difficult to get vendors to come in and provide if we have outside speakers coming in. So we were able to meet that by moving some of those days to a Friday versus right after holiday. So we looked at that. So we're able to meet a lot of different components from our operations team, learning services, our teachers, negotiations, and those components. So that was very exciting to be able to achieve that. One element that was elevated by the committee was the consideration of timing of spring break and how that timing worked with our folks that were in concurrent enrollment specifically, because it's difficult sometimes if they're still trying to go to school while they're trying to enjoy break and they're still doing their concurrent classes through Front Range. They're still required to be in session. We do believe we were not able to see the calendar, but we did some legwork to see that they are typically the 3rd week of March that they do spring break, so we stuck with that as well.
The Front Range,
Yeah.
where the majority of our current enrollment is.
And they have not released their calendar yet, so we had to go off of past practice. Right?
Yes. And some intel. We had some intel. We found a friend and said, hey, what does that look like? But we historically went back and looked, and they typically are on the 3rd week of the time frame. So we were hoping they would publish their calendar, and as of yesterday, they had not. So I did another check last night. Some of the changes to the actual calendar, such as change in the term of the word conferences. We had parent and teacher conferences before. We just changed that to conferences because we don't know who's going to attend or what the conference looks like. You'll notice there's an asterisk at the bottom, which was an ask by, I think, members of the community and those that were parents, an understanding of how conferences work. Knowing that although there's conference time circled on the calendar does not mean that everybody's going to come to conferences on, for example, October 15th, that there could be conferences throughout that week, and we just have a little asterisk at the bottom explaining to parents so they can plan accordingly to increase parent or guardian and parent participation in conferences. And then let's see. We also would like to add an informational sheet when we present the calendar out to our community that just explains some of the things we highlighted in the presentation today, like acknowledging those that maybe didn't participate in the survey, that here's what we heard, and here's what we are doing differently in the calendar, and here's why we've heard you, and why we're doing things the way we are, to give a little bit of educational value when we roll out the calendar to the public.
That's a great idea.
So, and then, let's see, make sure I cover all of that. I think that is all our components, unless you guys thought I missed something. Great. Now we are to the question portion of the calendar.
Rather than going down the line, do any of the rest of you have questions for the team that are not related to the survey? I have a couple, but I'm happy to go last.
I have one. When is Good Friday? Because I know for a lot of people that is, Easter, Resurrection Sunday.
We looked at that.
April 3rd.
We had,
Friday, April 3rd.
yeah,
April
we had
3rd,
all of
so
our.
it is a school day.
No.
No, that one's off.
April. It depends on the calendar. So we've had long discussions about
those types of holidays in the past.
Right,
We
yeah.
did take
That's
into
what I was
consideration religious celebrations for the entirety of our community. We have a pretty extensive spreadsheet. We tried our best to be able to accommodate what is a traditional acknowledgement, but we did not go to great lengths to incorporate holiday celebrations that were of a denominational background, because it would be really difficult to try to accommodate that for everyone.
I would, March, for 2027, it's actually Friday, March 26th is Good Friday.
Yeah.
Friday, March 26th.
And the predictability is really important too. Good Friday, Easter, those types of holidays bounce around quite frequently.
Right.
And so we are not able to create a predictable calendar of days off in that sense for our families. And so we tried to create a system that allowed us, the largest request was predictability. So with a 2-year calendar, we've got a very predictable set of days off for our families.
I'm curious if families are keeping their kids home on a religious holiday, is there an attendance exemption for that? I don't remember.
Well, that's one of the
Those
things
new
that came up.
Well, I know it's one of the new policy yet.
But the
Right,
We're not ready for that.
but that definitely was one of the factors in the new policy that we wanted to make sure that we had looked at, because
I think they're
we knew there were some challenges with that.
I would say from a building principal perspective, we always excused
Yes.
those holiday days
Agreed.
when families requested a day off for religious
Yeah.
observation.
And
That's
we
a
would
big-
They may
accommodate those
still
from
send you
staff
a letter.
perspective.
The state makes us in the letter,
Yep.
but we'll make, even in our new policy, we may be able to articulate that more clearly.
Anyone else before I ask my 2 questions, and they're quick?
Sure.
First one is, how do our dates compare with our neighboring districts? And the reason I'm asking that question is particularly with Poudre, since we have a number of folks who live in Poudre, have children of their own but work in Thompson. How do our dates compare with not just Poudre, but with our neighboring districts?
They're fairly matched.
Okay.
I would say the big ones being our winter, fall, and spring breaks. Those are matched.
Okay.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Starting day matches. I figured.
Starting day matches, last day of school for the most part matches. The ones where we are off a little bit are our professional development days compared with
Okay.
their professional development days as well as conferences.
But those are contract days, so.
Some school districts don't do a transition day, whereas we do, so little differences.
Yeah, they do have a transition day. Their day is 1 day earlier than ours, so they are starting on the 18th, we're starting on the 19th.
All right. One thing that concerned me a little bit, and I think you can probably explain away my concern, was one of the first slides, when you had the list of the various members of the committee.
Yes.
There was only one person, I believe, who was identified as a community member. And obviously, parents are community members, but only one of the 17 or 18 people was specifically identified as a community member. As a board member, should I be concerned about that there was only one? Or did I misread it or misunderstand it?
Many of the other people on that committee
Have
are
children.
also community members.
Right, but they're not identified on the chart as community members, they're identified as parents.
I think it's more of a space issue. If we could list every stakeholder group that each of our participants joined, then it would be too long to put on the slide.
Okay.
This particular individual is both a parent and a community member. She's a longstanding member of our community.
Right, I
That's
actually
really
know
sought
her.
that out.
Yeah, yeah.
So she represented both that lens of I'm a parent, I've got students here, but
Okay.
I also serve this community piece.
All right.
She was really intentional about painting that picture about herself.
As long as you feel as a committee that you have enough community representation on the committee and in terms of what you're telling us, I won't be concerned about it. But
I think
I did want to call your attention to it because I noticed it when I first looked at the list.
We did have some other community members, if I remember correctly, there were a couple additional people that were interested, but they could not in the end when they determined what the time commitment was for that and the times that we're meeting, things like that, that did not end up working in their schedule. I think part of the reason, and I was not on I'm new to the calendar committee, so I'll have to, those that like Sue and others who've been on the committee before, is part of the reason, that's why we do the survey, is to get a sense of community members. But if you look at the participation on the survey, people who actually fell in the community member category, the number of people that answered it were very low. The people that answered it were people who were our employees of the district, parents or guardians, students. They had some affiliation with the district on a regular basis, but our percent of community as a whole was low. But we would say because she had no affiliation, we referred to her as the community member, so.
Okay, all right. Thank you. You've taken care of my concerns. All right. Do you have what you need from us?
I think our questions, are there anything that we are meeting another time as a committee? And so is there anything you guys are hoping that we address?
Or anything?
The only other thing in addition to the one in the one sheeter is I would definitely include that piece that we talked about with the difference between the 2 days.
We are gonna add that, yes.
Perfect.
We're
'Cause
gonna
I think
do,
that- yeah.
okay, what is it?
A K-5 and a 6-12 count.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
And also counts for each month. I know it's helpful for some families to see how many days, or how many staff members too, how many days in each month we're actually in school, and we can do that by K-5 and 6-12.
So it'll be kind of in the outside column, and towards the end of the month, I'll have just a number of days.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Board, any other questions or comments? We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Great, thank you guys for your time this
Thank you.
evening.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item 3.7, standard action consent items. Dr. Heller, do we need to discuss anything in regard to this
I don't
today?
believe so, no. You have your personnel recommendations
Yeah.
and your contracts greater than 50,000. As you can see, as of right now, there's only one contract greater than 50,000 for the 17th.
All right, we'll move then to the CASB update, and that's me. Marley, did you have a chance to send out those slides to the board? Okay, thank you. And this will be quick. I am our voting delegate to the business meeting at the CASB convention. And there will be 2 resolutions that were not passed at the fall conference that are coming to the large group at the CASB conference. The first one is proposed by the Edison School District. I know you can read, but it's short, so let me read it to you quickly. Proposed legislation allowing one at-large, out-of-district candidate to be appointed or elected to occupy a seat on the District Board of Education if there are no other in-district candidates available to fill the vacancy, allowing local district policy to prevail and override if desired. What was discussed at the fall conference, and there were several people from very small districts who talked about the difficulty that they have in getting people to serve on their school boards, and so this is a way of approaching that. It's not unusual in some small districts for the same person to be a school board member for 25 or 30 years, and I'm not exaggerating. And so this is one method that they're proposing to approach this. I thought you might be interested to know if this would be possible in the Thompson School District. And the answer to that is not unless we would change policy. So our policy is policy BBBA, which requires that someone who is running for the school board be a resident of the school district for at least 12 months prior to election, and also to be a resident of the director district in which they are a candidate. So although I will be voting on this on our behalf, this is something that, unless we would change policy, is something that is not something we would have to deal with. I'm interested to know what your reaction is. I'm kind of asking you, I guess, to either put yourself in the position of somebody in one of these small districts, or just in general, so that when I vote, I'm not voting what I think, I'm voting what you think.
I have just a clarification. It's the term appointed that is kind of jumps out at me. And I think it's allowing at-large out-of-district candidates, so it's presumably somebody who does not meet whatever the residency requirements, and can be appointed. So, I mean, could then you as a majority appoint stack your board if you so choose, or deliberately appoint some, I mean, I just, to me, I look at
understand.
that and
It is my understanding, the way it's written, that that appointment would only happen if a board member were to step down, or if there wasn't a candidate in the election, then the board could potentially appoint somebody to fill a vacant. So, you know, if a board member stepped down midterm, you have to appoint somebody. They could then appoint somebody who doesn't live in the district, but only if there's not a candidate that lives in the district who applies to be appointed.
In the whole district or just the specific director district?
Well, I think a lot of these small rurals aren't director districts, or at-large.
They are one director district, districts, some of them. They're so small.
So it's just 5 at-large candidates, basically, or whatever.
Yeah.
but and this is either for further clarification, this is not proposing they do it, it's just that they recommend that the state legislature take it up.
That's right.
So there's no guarantee.
This,
that any
this
action
is
goes forward.
a proposal that's coming to CASB, and if it were to pass, CASB would forward this on to the state legislature and say, we, as the governing body of Colorado school boards, believe this is something that you should consider.
My only thought, and I don't wanna get, because it's late and I'm fatigued of a long work day. I would think, I think, I understand, because I work in a lot of rural communities around, in Wyoming as well, and I understand that this is how, this is an issue, just, if there's like a cap, if it says, you know, with enrollment below a certain number or something, just because you know,
I think you're right. Like, there's nothing that would to stop Thompson School District to say, we're gonna change our policy and allow this in Thompson School District, right? Even
Yeah.
though we shouldn't do that based on, we have plenty of population base to fill a board.
Yeah, exactly, so.
We would have to change policy, yes.
Yeah, that's my only kind of.
All right.
So amend.
I've noted that. The other thing that concerned me as I have read this is that the wording is to occupy a seat on the District Board of Education in the district which an immediate family member is enrolled as a student. What happens if the student drops out of the school? And this person from outside the district is now a member of the school board with no family member, no student as part of it. For me, that's a problem. So talk to me a little bit. I don't want to belabor this point because this will be a large group decision, but.
I just think, I understand from the rural perspective, the problem that they have, but the way they've written it, it feels like they're trying to make the solution for the rural fit
Available to everybody.
everybody, and I don't see that that's workable. I have my very similar concerns as Mike, depending on, you know, who's who and what's what. I just think maybe they should just work on it so that the language provides what Mike said with a district size cap, or they say that this specifically is only for districts designated as rural or something.
All right. Would you like to take a position either in favor of or against this? Or do you want to just trust me when I go to this business meeting and hear the discussion to vote based on that? And I'm comfortable with doing either way, your choice.
Well, since I've expressed to hear more of my opinion on that, I trust that, given the fact that this is just recommending legislation.
Yes.
I'm fine with, it does not bother, if you wanna kind of represent us as you see fit, I'm
And
comfortable.
I will be one of more than 100 district representatives who will be voting on this, so.
The other thing I would say, if it doesn't come up in the conversation that I think should be amended, is also the limitation for, so your concerns are valid as far as what if the family member is no longer in school, which happens when kids also age out, right? Like,
Yeah.
when our parents have time is usually not until our kids are older, and then they graduate while we're here. And I think that there's a good pool of people in some of the rural areas who might be a business owner in town, but they live right outside of the district. Maybe they're a former educator, same thing, where they're close enough that they could do it. I think that there if they're actually trying to solve this problem, they need to have the pool, be more expansive instead of less, because they're not actually gonna help themselves with the way that they wrote in the limitation. And I have seen that same thing where there's a district I looked at earlier this year where they had 3 open seats in a small board because they couldn't get anybody. So I get how real this problem is, and so I think that, you know, for their own sake, solving for our concerns and also making sure that they don't pigeonhole themselves into something that creates the same problem but is, I think, helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then quickly moving to the other one, I don't know as much about it because it was introduced at the fall conference and was not part of the booklet that I received ahead of time. I won't read it to you. You can read it there. And I would be interested in whether you have any thoughts on that. Dr. Heller, having lived in other parts of the country, do you have a thought about this? So this is basically something that was like a non-funded mandate or
Yeah,
a
I mean, it's-
non-funded availability.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you have these rural districts who've gone to a 4-day school week.
Yeah, and
But
that's
don't
what-
have the funds to bring in like a 5th day enrichment opportunity for kids who either need enrichment or intervention. And so essentially allowing, urging General Assembly to fund those 5th day programs for these school districts who made this choice, especially the rural districts that have made this choice.
What's your feeling about this?
Well, I mean, it says it was whatever that House Bill 21-1006 was supposed to create this
Yes.
grant program, so.
And it was,
like,
they were on a 3-year cycle, I think, but it's
But
never
what-
been fully funded.
Because the state doesn't have the money to fund it?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's even a case of fully funded. I'm not sure, trying to remember the discussion at the fall conference, if it's been funded at all,
It sounds like it
much less
hasn't been
fully
funded at all.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Never, it says it's never been funded.
Yeah, it's,
So,
it's always one of those conversations we talk about the calendar, the 4-day
At what
4-day school
cost?
week, right?
right.
There's a cost beyond just doing the 4-day school week. You have to consider, like, there are gonna be
Yeah.
students who are still going to need to come to school probably on that Friday to do some additional intervention enrichment. That needs to be planned as part of your budget when you make a decision to go to 4 days.
But so if we make the state fund this, what is the
At what
state then
cost?
not funding?
Correct.
But I also think too, I don't wanna throw rural districts, but if you choose not to invest in your school district and you have to go to 4 days because you choose not to, that is a decision of the community. And then you come back and say, we need the money from the state to fund what we choose not to fund locally.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little bit of an issue with that, and so and I say this respectfully because I spend a lot of time particularly in the Eastern Plain communities, and if you choose to be low tax, you have to live with those consequences. And I think to come back to the state and say, we need you to backfill, I'm a little, I have mixed feelings.
Sure. I'll ask you the question I asked about the other one. Do you want to take a board position on this one? Or again, do you want me to vote after I have heard more of the discussion at the conference? Go ahead.
Just a quick comment on that, because I guess my question is, which way was it the state that mandated this, or was it the schools that wanted, are they the ones who requested this, that, how did it become this law? And I guess, to me, that's where you really kind of have to look at where should the funding come from, because, if it was, like Director Scholl said, if it's, hey, they need to have these extra programs for that 5th day, and they're the ones who wanted it, and that's how this law came to be, yeah, I kind of have a challenge with that. But if it was something that the state mandated, I guess that's a lot of gray area until you know which direction, who requested what, who's put it into place, who made the request.
No, I agree, and how did this House Bill 21 come about, and why was it passed if it was never gonna be able to be funded? And, so I would agree with
And since we likely wouldn't be able to get these answers prior to the conference, will you trust me then on this one to,
Yes.
to listen and see
You've heard
what?
our concerns.
And ultimately, what this one is doing, if anything, is it's urging them to fund something they've already said they were gonna maybe fund. That's, legislators love to say no even if we urge them, so.
Okay.
Well,
All right, that concludes.
speaking of funding.
Yeah, that concludes my report. The legislature will go into session again after the first of the year, and I'll keep you posted as I go to virtual meetings of that.
May I make a personal request? Can we,
Of course.
Can we take a short break?
Absolutely.
Before we go in?
To the funding
If you can
challenges?
just hang on, Zach.
Oh, come on.
I am required to drink a lot more
Biological
water
break
than I
needs to
usually do. That's the
Let's take a 7-minute break about that. All right, folks, we are ready for agenda item 5.1, funding challenges, which is another part of the Zach show for us tonight, right?
I'm a triple threat.
All right, you're on.
So I'll just so the conversation is just kind of make everybody aware about. Well, basically, I'll just kind of tee this up by saying this is kind of a recurring theme with everybody. Like expenses are escalating at a greater rate than what our income is coming in. I just saw that an email from Case where the state's having the same exact issue, and this kind of all wraps into not just like how it is for us, but how it is widespread. And this presentation just goes into what are the things that we need to be mindful of, especially when we're going into our next budget season. So the revenue overview is saying, property, obviously, state aid, property taxes are primary funding sources. But those, I'm also, admittedly, I'm new to the education financing too. But how those kind of tail with each other as property tax goes up, our state equalization will go down, and so they offset each other. So we are usually not a beneficiary of escalating property taxes. If it benefits us in one way, it hurts us in another, so they always kind of stay the same. So based on our pupil count, as everybody knows, that we have declining pupil count, and so that kind of tees us up for what's going to happen really in 27 and 28. So in 25, 26, which we're here now, and the 26, 27, the state is committed to funding us at a hold harmless, which just as essence means that they're going to give us the money that we got last year for the next 2 years. And so that's a good thing, because what that does is that gives us a little bit of time to kind of give us a game plan. But when this email that I just saw came out from Case, that the state might be thinking, reevaluating that because of their own funding constraints. So what that was is what they were doing with the state funding is they're doing the step down where they would go do a student averaging from 4 to 3 years. So it kind of steps us down as our declining enrollment goes, so we can kind of smooth that out. But as the state has had their own funding challenges, they are at least anecdotally thinking about maybe like speeding that up. I'll take that with a grain of salt, but I just wanted to kind of reiterate, kind of add that to this conversation. So basically what this slide is just telling us is that the money that we're going to get next year is maybe 1-2% increase. It's not really going to be significant to really meet our needs, but at least we have this year and next year to kind of get a game plan as to like what it's going to look like if and when this, the funding from the state kind of fluctuates. So anyway, next slide, Laura Lee. So mill levy override, that's really our main funding source. And so back to the conversation for the mill levies, We have our 99, 2006, and 2018 mill levy override. So with the 99 and 2006, as we saw, those are a fixed dollar amount, the 7.5 and the $6.5 million, and those are stuck there. The benefit that we get from the 2018 mill levy override is that can actually go up because that's fixed at the 7.6 mill levy, and we get the benefit of those increasing property values. However, as the slide says, we're able to only raise $4.2 million or $42 million at 25% of that state funding. So really what that means is right now we're about $38 million, and so we have only about $3.5–4 million of headroom left until we hit that ceiling. And so that really is going to limit our upward potential of the money that we can get going on there. So let's see. So yeah, that gives us only potential 0.6 interest or increase to general fund. So really, what that means is really we're limited as our upward potential, that the money that we get from both property taxes and from the state. Next slide. So then to make then when it comes to our grant funding, federal funds is about $13 million. And right now, as everybody knows, is those federal funding dollars have been coming, at least they're more cumbersome, like with fluctuations with the administration and everything like that. But also, funding cuts in different programs if they come through at all. And so that's kind of like another component with how we dovetail all these funding sources together. And when we're limited in our meat and potatoes with the property taxes and our state funding, and paired with our federal funding going down or becoming less reliable, that kind of just compounds the issue. Next slide. So that kind of like that sums up like the issues with the inflows. Now the outflows are what are the things, the expenditures that we're kind of dealing with, and the main drivers of where we're seeing increases. So the board prioritized salaries that we have for this year, which was great, but that is kind of like one of those components that is the increase. Para contributions are going up, and as those salaries go up, that para contribution becomes a bigger chunk of the district's contribution, which is 21%. So higher salaries, then in addition to that, we have health insurance increases. This year was 13%, or $2.3 million, and it probably increased that. I'm not a soothsayer, but it seems to be just like an increase, at least in a single 8–9% on top of that, just because of insurance rates. So then FTE annual adjustments based on student counts, those are other challenges. And then also funding when we're going in and filling in vacancies for people for positions for speech therapy and occupational therapists. We've had a hard time filling those positions, so in order to meet those needs, we have to contract them out, which are typically more expensive. And so that just kind of compounds. So these are kind of things that we've seen overall that we need to think about when we're seeing about these funding challenges. So next slide. Then non-payroll sides. Well, to take a step back, when we're talking about our overall budget for the newer folks, it's kind of an 80-20 split. On our personnel takes up about 80%, 20% is the non-personal side, which is the slide deck that we're on. But that's kind of like the bigger target and what are driving those costs, insurance, payroll, things like that. But on the other side of it, non-payroll sides, special ed, costs are rising, transportation, gas, utility costs. I know we have the energy efficiency costs or that energy project that we're going through right now that would help minimize that utility cost, but it's still a factor that might lessen that impact, but my sense is we'd still see increases of that. So that's something else that we need to consider. Aging buildings, so obviously we're blessed with the bond and we can get some of those things done, but as we all know, those maintenance and utility and capital needs are well over what we're getting through the bond. So that's kind of something that we need to consider as well. Operational budgets, $1 to $2 million for critical capital needs, and then our favorite subject, the tariffs. The slide deck says IT would expect 25%, but I think that would be not exclusive to just IT. I think that everything, especially capital costs, that usually see a increase of maybe closer to 7 or 8%, just in normal inflation rates on capital costs. So those are kind of compounding issues when we're talking about flat, I'll just call them flat revenue growth, and then 8, 9, 10% in our expenses. So next slide. So anyway, I'll before we go into questions, that kind of sums it up. But in addition to all these kind of the revenues and the expenses conflicting against each other, what I have seen is cash flow. That kind of comes into our cash flow conversation. So this year, or actually last year, we started taking out our interest-free loans to stave off until we get our property taxes in March. So we did that. We started that in January. This time we have to start it in December because of triggers that were pulled that needed to be pulled last year, and now they're kind of that match has been lit, and now that match is done. So that kind of moved that up a little bit more. But when I reached out to the state to start this process earlier, they must be coming through the same sort of struggles too, because I was like, I need X amount of dollars, and they'd say, well, it'd be super great if you maybe needed a little bit less. And so it becomes this negotiation thing. And I'm like, I didn't really know that was a thing. I thought I just needed it and I pay you back. So I can feel it on the other side of the fence when it comes to those cash flow needs and those funding sources. So those are all those challenges that we have: increasing costs, flat revenues, but also those cash flow issues that we're having to mind at the same time. So with all that said, I'll open it up for questions, discussions, and thoughts.
And Denise, would you like to lead off with any questions?
I'm going to reserve. You pass. I'm going to pass for now.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Mike.
Thank you this is really helpful. I mean, I feel like there's probably 50 different questions I have, but I'm gonna, like Denise, reserve the balance of my time for future discussion, because there are different ideas. I mean, I think, you know, you either cut your spending or you increase your revenue. And, you know, and I think we have to think about kind of what makes the most sense. And, you know, I think this is a good starting point for having those discussions. So.
Yeah, and I think this isn't all bad news. I think having Bob and I in our role, I think we're starting something that hasn't historically been done with reporting, how we're structuring our budgeting. And so smart budgeting, when it becomes just more transparent, clear across the whole system, those funding challenges, although they're real, you can, when you have more clarity in your systems with how we're budgeting, because we're actually talking about a budget system right now and how we're going to kind of build this system up. You get clarity on if we have overages in some place. you see other kind of opportunities that you might not normally have seen before. And so that makes the conversation a little bit more easy when you're when everything is just, not as clear. Those focal points make decisions a lot easier.
Sorry, I know with some of the urban renewal kind of issues in the city of Loveland particularly are coming out. They're coming off the books in not I'd say soon, but within the next 5 years, or some of them, some of the initial ones. Is that playing? Will that influence?
I'm not exactly sure how that would that has helped us. It is currently helping us. So, like with the Sotera development, we're a beneficiary of that with the High Plains. So that helped build and develop that school, and so that's certainly something that that is a possibility. I don't know how the future aspects of things like that.
The 30-year window or the 30-year threshold, I think, has to be. Sorry,
I couldn't intelligently speak to that, but that's something I could definitely look into to see if that might be an opportunity or how that would affect us.
Cool. Okay, Mike, done. Alexander.
So I have a couple of things. One, I mean, sort of general looking at the expense part of it is, I think, like Mike said, I think it's obviously not a problem we're going to solve today. But I think looking at, where there are sort of, like you said, where there are efficiencies that can be found or where there are things, I think is important. And I think for you, Dr. Heller, looking at, sort of from the admin level, I think we've heard from a few places, not tonight, but over time, is that there are concerns about, things maybe not being as streamlined as they could be.
Yep.
And so I think that's something to look at, as far as what we're spending, to make sure that we are being as efficient as we can. Unfortunately, so with the, the health insurance, went up 13. I'm on also the joint insurance committee, and it's similar next year, if not worse. It's going to be a hefty insurance renewal for health insurance. So that's a little bit concerning. And then as far as the revenue side of it, again, I don't know, this isn't something we would decide today, but Sue brought us the resolution last meeting about a resolution that some school districts are adopting that would go, that basically is a resolution supporting placement of a statewide ballot initiative on the November ballot to increase K-12 funding and enhance educator salaries. And so that's something that I think I would like to have on our board agenda at some point in the near future to talk about that and discuss if that's something we want to support. Because we know the state itself isn't going to give us more money. We just asked our voters for more money, and they thankfully gave us some. But this would be another way to look at statewide, a way that could help us get a little bit more money as well.
Yeah, and when it comes to like my background, where I came from, is like just being really mindful as to like the priorities and the strategic objectives of the board and the district, and saying, if we buy this thing, how does that further us down the field?
Right.
But being really in tune with that, so we're actually like maximizing our dollar, and then looking for those efficiencies too.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. I guess I'm just gonna say the parts out loud that I think other people might not know come with this, right? So like, we have definitely the insurance cost is one example where it looks so easy to go, well, why don't we pass that along? But then we've been fighting to have an increase in wages, and we know that if we pass anything along, we're negating what we've fought for. And I think that has happened with every one of the things that we haven't yet done, right? We've definitely had conversations around, should we be looking at consolidating more schools? Should we be looking at larger classroom sizes? Should we be getting rid of some of the additional services, right? And the answer to all of that is quite a bit of it we could do. I mean, right, practically speaking, we don't have to provide any transportation except for special education, right? If we get rid of all other transportation except for the one that we're mandated to provide, that will be a way to balance the budget or get some progress anyway. Consolidating schools. We've talked about the fact that while that is a one-time savings, after that you pretty much lose that, because even if you're putting them all, even if you consolidate into one school, you still really have the same amount of students. And so in the end, there's only so much you can do there. There's only so many classroom sizes you can increase. And the reason I say these things is because it came up as we look at each piece independently. And I know that I get a lot of feedback about all of those topics when we talk about it. And the side effects of it. And often the people who are contacting me because of the impact it has to our most vulnerable students. Every time, that's the reason that people reach out to me, is that it's usually kids who are already on an IEP, who don't have transportation, where it's not just as easy as telling my boss I'm going to be at work late. They're in a position where that's not an option, so kids won't go to school if they don't have transportation from us, right? There are those kinds of calls that I get, and I know I'm not the only one. And so I guess that's also part of what I just want to raise, because the pressure is hitting us from literally every side. Every place that we get money is going to give us less money. Every cost we have is increasing. And we are mandated, because they haven't changed that. They might not be funding it, but they haven't changed what we have to do. We don't have a lot of wiggle room on what we can do less of. The things that we could do less of are things that we've been doing because we know that that's what actually helps our graduation rates, and it helps our students get to school and be successful. And so absolutely we can do less. We can. But we cannot do less without impacting the people who work for us, and we're the biggest employer in both Loveland and Berthoud, which has an impact on the entire, both infrastructures, when we pay less, or we do less, or we hire less. We can provide less services, but again, that goes back to then, that work then isn't in our community, right? That's people who would have to do something else. And in the end, there's efficiencies that we get from this, right? There's kids that go to school because that's where they eat, maybe not for any other reason. So I worry about that, because we're not making this decision by ourselves. We didn't make any of these decisions by ourselves either before now, right? The pressure came from a whole lot of people. And I worry about this, and I know that our community has shared concerns with me about each one of these things individually, meaning pain. And now you put it all in one slide deck, and I don't know if I'm not gonna make it through the evening without crying. So I just wanna say that for everybody else, I'm gonna continue to prioritize the things that I know ultimately help kids be successful in school, as we have, I think, done with real due diligence, but in the end, there is not a way to make it through this that isn't painful, and I don't know what to do with that. And I just have to say that out loud, because I'm sure I'm not the only one thinking it, so I'm gonna say it. And I didn't swear yet, so I'll shut up.
All right. I don't have any questions or comments. Nancy?
To Director Shull, I think the URA ends in 2030, the one that you are referring to.
Yeah, that's good.
And I know when it ends, there will be
Some.
pot of money that will come back to the district, but I don't think anyone has any idea of.
And I
is it
don't
gonna-
think it's a
you know,
lot. I
It's
mean,
gonna, it's not gonna be like
A
something
windfall?
that's gonna save us from
No.
anything. I just, again, it's not a pleasant conversation. I think a lot of it will just require, at some point, we're gonna have to really decide what is really the core functions of education, and what are some things that we've allowed the state to push on us that should be put to other departments like the county health department or whatever. Or even at some point, we may have to say, it's great we can do concurrent enrollment so kids can get 2 years of community college, but that's beyond what K-12 is. I mean, again, I don't know what the future holds, but those are the kinds of decisions that we may have to look at. The state itself is gonna have to start making some really hard decisions of where are they supposed to really be spending the money for their core functions to ensure that they can give the money to K-12 and other entities for their core functions. So it is a lot of this is out of our control, so. Appreciate the conversation, and it's just one of those things where I have to keep talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Lori, you're the last one with comments or questions, and then Zach, if you want to wind things in.
What was the pupil count on October 1st? You said that was declining enrollment?
That is a great question.
October 14,281, is that what it was?
Right about
I think it was 14,281, that's just in my head for some reason.
14.
That's scary that it's there. It's there.
You dream about that at night.
I do.
And then, just in regard to the health insurance, for the employees, how much shopping around do we do for benefits such as health insurance?
Are my HR buddies back there?
I can answer it if you want me to.
Okay.
So we get our health insurance through what's called, right now, currently we get our health insurance through what's called the CEBT, which is the Colorado something.
Educational Benefit Trust.
But it's not just educational, because they do
Yes,
it
they've
for
now expanded beyond
municipals
just
too.
education.
Yeah, but it's a trust, a nonprofit trust by the state of, within the state of Colorado, that different school districts and other municipal organizations buy into, and we pay in and then get insurance from them. We've been with them for a number of years, and they have good rates with them as compared to like other options would be if we self-insured, which would be way more expensive, or going through like we move through like more of a commercial thing. We think we're getting a good deal with them. We are, however, through the Joint Insurance Committee, we're in the process right now of, we'll be doing a sort of an analysis of that, and they actually are going out and seeking bids from other insurance companies, and we'll look at those, I think in like early spring, to see, and if it turns out that there is in fact a better option, then we'd discuss potentially switching to that.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I mean, we switched insurances here, and my husband was able to save quite a bit for health insurance, so, shopping around a lot of times does pay off.
Right, yeah.
Any other questions, board members, comments, Dr. Heller?
No, I mean, the only thing I guess I would say is, this is on the agenda. If you remember, those of you who were here during the retreat earlier in the fall, one of the board priorities for discussion at a study session was funding challenges. So that's really why this lives on the agenda. Zach is stepping up because we put this all on the agenda, and then Bob went and had a shoulder surgery, so Zach gets to take it all. So appreciate Zach stepping up and doing all this tonight for us. So.
Yeah, and I think I like the things coming down the pike, and I don't know if Bob has shared with the board yet, but this new budget structure, like a reporting structure, and that it really will show, like, highlight pockets of you know, opportunities and challenges before they come down the pike. And I think that is really the key to success, you know, going forward, is just that clear insight as to like those funding challenges, and just how the structure looks at a whole, at a glimpse. I think those will benefit us greatly to give us more informed decisions that you all can make to set us up for success in the next couple of years.
Anything else for the good of the order before I tap the gavel? Thank you.
It said future topics for board consideration.
Yes, do you have something?
I do have something. The city council last night, Laura Board does meet next week, December 9th. I didn't know if we were setting, city council sets all their boards and commissions the night that they install their new members. And so that is one that,
So we will have to decide which member of the board will serve on the Lura board for our school district. I think the discussion was to do that as part of the rest of our committees next week at CASB. Yeah, we probably need to have at least somebody, see if they'd be willing to attend the meeting that's coming up before CASB, which is next week, just until we have a permanent member. So I don't know if that's
just to have some representation.
To have representation in the room.
You're interested in?
I would volunteer myself.
Okay. Is that all right with everybody for Lori to
settle
serve
serve
as a
CASB next week?
They're in the middle of the night.
Yes. Yes.
Much later.
Very
than
few people are
this.
gonna fight you on that one, I don't think.
Thank you, Lori, and maybe then at the retreat, you can give us a brief report of what happens, okay? Just one comment before I tap the gavel. Thank you, board, for coming so prepared and for the excellent questions that were asked this evening, and a particular thank you to our new board members, to Mike and to Lori, who showed up for their first meeting. It's a long study session.
You promised they would all be like this.
No, I've told them that too. Prepared and ready to ask good questions. So with that,